The parents stood dumbfounded when they saw the boy, a carbon copy of their twins, at the train station. A 6-year-old boy stood in the middle of the station square. He was scared, looking around, and didn't know where to go. "Are you lost?" A strange woman in a brightly colored outfit approached him. Yes, tears were about to roll from his eyes, but he held them back. "Come with me." She held out her hand to him. The boy gave her his hand, and they walked through the crowd. At one point, he was frightened, broke free, and ran. "Where are you going?" The gypsy woman shouted after him, but he ran without looking back. The boy saw that the doors of the wagon were open and ran in. This very wagon was not attached to anything. It had just been standing there for many years. The boy walked along the doors, went into one of the compartments, sat down on the seat. It was warm and there was no one there. "Mom," he looked out the window, but there was no one there on the tracks. When it got dark, he was hungry. His stomach was rumbling, but he realized that if he left here, he would be picked up and taken away. And he didn't want that, because his mom would come back and he wouldn't be here. How would she find him then? He cried. Now that he was alone, he could do it. After that, he didn't notice how he fell asleep. "Hey, is there someone here?" He heard male voices in the night and opened his eyes. He was scared. "Come in, there's no one here," said another voice. Presently, 2 men climbed into the same wagon where the boy had been. They started rustling something, swearing. The boy heard it all. He lurked like a mouse. "Come on, let's have a proper sit down," said one. "What don't you like here?" The other one answered him. Narrow opened the compartment door of the one who wanted to sit down. He dragged some kind of sack in, and then he himself fell into the cramped space. Oh, they heard a child's cry. Who? The man started to look around, but it was dark. Now, flicked a second lighter. "How are you doing?" They saw the kid. Mom left it. He crawled out from under the table. "How did you leave it? Permanently or temporarily?" The men were stunned to find a small child here. "She'll be back," the boy said pitifully. "What's your name?" One of his buddies leaned over to his face. Alex, who was smearing a tear down his cheeks. "Don't cry, Alex. Everything will be fine. Your mom will come." The other one ruffled his hair. They, not paying attention to the boy, sat down and began to put everything in the bag. And there was a lot of stuff, mostly jewelry. They had just come back from a job that had gone well today, and now they were dividing up the loot. "Anthony, why did you give yourself so much money?" One of them started to get indignant. "Don't yell, I'll be right there." They were flicking the lighter back and forth to get a glimpse. "Are you hungry?" asked the one called Anthony at the boy. "Yes," he nodded. Alex's eyes were so big when he saw it all. The man took bread and lard out of another bag, broke it off, gave it to the boy. "Thank you," the man said. Together they spent the whole night here. When it started to get light, Anthony and his friend just left. "Come on, Pariah, don't be sour. Mom will definitely come today." They told him goodbye and left him a gingerbread. Alex looked out the window again. He was waiting for her to appear, but Mom was not there. It made him so sad that tears ran down his face again. Now, when it was light, he saw that there were blankets on top. They were all dusty and torn, but Alex didn't care. He was freezing. Slowly, he pulled one out. Pulling it up, the others fell in after him. The boy wrapped himself up, put it on the shelf and waited. In the evening, he tried to go to sleep quickly, not to think and not to be afraid. And in the morning, they found him. No, not his mother, but the station workers. They were looking for the 2 men who had shared the loot last night. They saw that the carriage was unlocked. They decided to check, and there was the boy. "Who are you? Where are your parents?" A policeman asks him here at the station. "I'm Alex. Mom's gone somewhere. I'm lost." He wanted to cry again. "Where did she go?" The man asked the small child. "I don't know. I couldn't help but cry." "Okay, I see. We need to call custody." He got up from his chair. The station master walked into the office. Word had reached him that a little boy was lost. He saw him and smiled. "Were you with your mom?" He leaned over and asked him. "Yes," nodded the man. "I've never seen her leave a child like that," the man said in a half voice. "Do you know his parents?" "Where did she go?" the man asked the small child. "I don't know. I couldn't help but cry." "Okay, I see. We need to call custody." He got up from his chair. The station master walked into the office. Word had reached him that a little boy was lost. He saw him and smiled. "Were you with your mom?" He leaned over and asked him. "Yes," nodded the man. "I've never seen her leave a child like that," the man said in a half voice. "Do you know his parents?" "Yeah, and I'll call them right now." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. Alex heard all this and couldn't believe that his mom would come for him again and they would be happy. He sat down on the chair and looked at the door to see when it would open. Not an hour later, a woman burst into the office. Her eyes were frightened. She looked at the boy, and Alex sat and thought that she should leave as soon as possible because she was blocking his view. Katie and Selena met and saw each other for the first time at school when their parents brought them there. The girls immediately sat at the same desk. "My name is Selena," she turned to her desk mate. "And I'm Katie," the first grader told her back then. "Shall we be friends?" They both laughed. Yeah, Katie was okay with that. From that moment on, the girls were inseparable. They were always and everywhere together. They went to school, did their homework, and played outside. Their parents were happy that Selena and Katie had formed such a close bond. "It's good if they carry that friendship through life," said Sarah, Selena's mother. "Yes, they are like sisters," Olga Ivanovna, Katie's mother, agreed with her. The girls really thought they were sisters. If something happened at school, they stood up for each other. One didn't learn, the other gave advice. They did everything together. "Come to my place tonight," Katie told Selena. "What are we gonna do there?" They were already in 5th grade. "I don't know, we'll play something." Katie started to remember what toys she had. "Okay, just for a little while, or it's a lot of assignments," Selena agreed with her. So they met every night, one or the other. Everything was fine with the girls. They did not think about any guys or discos. They were still young, so they had only toys on their minds. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" asked Katie to her friend. "I haven't decided yet. I guess I'll be a teacher," she said. "And what are you?" "And I want to become a doctor," the girl answered with such a serious look. "Oh, they say you have to study to be a doctor for a long time," Selena said smartly. "It's okay. I'll help people later." Katie was sure of it. Time moved on. Now that the girls were not so young that they could go anywhere, their mothers decided to send them on vacation. They found out what vouchers were available, and for the summer the girls went to one big and famous camp in the south. They had a good time there and came back happy and tanned. "How did you like it?" their parents asked them. "Of course, if there are vouchers for next year, make sure we get one." The girls knew they wouldn't be bored. As the new school year began, Selena and Katie were still just as inseparable. "Will you come over to visit tonight?" After school, Katie asked. "I don't know today. It's back to school tomorrow," her friend told her. "Come, I'll show you something," Katie told her conspiratorially. "What?" Selena even got curious. "When you come, I'll show you." Her friend didn't bother to tell her everything. Selena came home. She couldn't even imagine what Katie wanted to show her. Everything she had in the house she had seen a long time ago. Then the girl remembered that Katie kept talking about some kind of basement. She said that when they moved, her parents had shoved everything she had into that basement. Maybe she had gone to that very basement, and now she wanted to show it to Selena. She quickly did her homework, left her mom a note saying she had gone to Katie's, and went outside. Her friend didn't live too far away, so within 10 minutes, Selena was at her place. "Well, what's there?" Intrigued, and you can't tell. She couldn't wait to find out what Katie had found and wanted to show her. "Come on in, I'll show you," smiled her friend. Selena went into the room where her grandmother offered her tea. The girl agreed because she knew that the woman made very tasty scones. While the grandmother went to the kitchen, Katie called the girl into a small room. They sat down at the table, and her friend took out an iron case. "What's that?" Selene didn't understand. "I'll tell you a story, you won't believe it," she told her. "My parents and I decided to dismantle our basement because there was a lot of junk taking up space. I asked to go with them, and we went." Just starting to tell Katie, as at that moment Grandma came in and put 2 cups of tea and a whole plate of scones on the table for her. "Thank you," they answered her with glee. "Eat to your heart's content." Grandma left the room and closed the door behind her. So when we were in there, I saw my old toys, dolls, railroad, and all that stuff. But I wasn't interested in it anymore, so we put it all in boxes and took it out to the yard. But there was still a lot of stuff in the basement, and when we went down there the second time, Dad said we should throw out the old dresser. Mom and I started pulling out the drawers to make it easier, and in one of the drawers I saw this box. I was so curious, I picked it up. But I couldn't open it for a long time, Katie continued to say. "And what? You never looked into it?" Selene wondered. She couldn't believe it. "Of course I looked in, but I didn't do anything. I left it to show you." She spoke as if it was someone's remains. "Well, come on, open up." The girlfriend couldn't wait. "Wait, that's not the whole story," stopped my friend Katie, as I was trying to open this box. "My mom came up to me and asked me what I was doing in there. I showed her. She smiled, came over, wanted to help me open it. She did it. It was really quick. Turns out it was just a matter of flipping some hardware off." Kathy told her all this. It was so mysterious and interesting. Selena couldn't wait to open the mysterious suitcase. Kathy looked at her friend, took hold of the iron bars and pulled them open. Selena saw several syringes, vials, and other medicines inside. "What's that?" She looked at her friend. It wasn't very intriguing. "Come on, look at these syringes." She pulled one out of the box. It was glass. "Well, yes, glass syringes. That's interesting." Took one and considered it. Selene. "My mom told me that this box belonged to my grandmother." The girl got up, opened the doors, and called out to the woman. When Veronica entered the room, she immediately noticed the iron briefcase that had once belonged to her. "Grandmother, please tell us why it belonged to you and what you did with it," asked her granddaughter. "Oh, girls, it's a long and sad story," Grandma told them. "We're not asking you to tell the whole story, just tell us what you did with it. I was a nurse then, and that case really helped a lot of people. Now you have disposable syringes. You buy them at the pharmacy, give them a shot, and throw them away. In the past, there were glass syringes, reusable. With one syringe, I went through the whole war. My grandmother was sitting and remembering what it was like then. There's Selena. There's a reason I wanted to be a doctor. Turns out my grandmother was one, and I'm following in her footsteps," Katie told her friend right away. "Yes," she agreed. They sat for a long time looking at everything in the box. Other than syringes, there was nothing of interest. "Let's play doctor," Katie suggested. "Come on, and which one of us is going to be the doctor?" Selena realized that, but asked anyway. "Let's take turns, first me and then you," the girlfriend suggested. It was more fun that way. Kathy put on a white headscarf, went into the hall, sat down on the sofa, and waited for her patients to come in. Selena came into the room, holding a plush toy. Katie expertly placed the toy on a diaper, then examined it, drew some liquid from an ampoule into a glass syringe, and injected it into the toy. The tissue immediately turned a dark color. "Here, this is where it hurts," the newly minted doctor said. "What to do?" Looked at her friend who had brought her a patient. "We need to do surgery," Katie said. She took the blade and cut where the cloth had darkened and pulled out the dirty absorbent cotton that was soiled from the product in the syringe. "That's it, I'm a doctor now, Selena told her. Then Kathy brought a similarly plush patient to see her, and all the manipulations were repeated. After all that, the animals were sewn up. So they changed several times, until Katie said she had no more plush toys to ruin. It was Selena's turn, so she pouted her lips and said that Katie had participated 4 times in this game and she had only participated 3. Okay, I'll find something. Katie went to her room. Then she brought out a doll that had a rubber head. How am I going to do her surgery if she's plastic? The girl wondered. So the head is rubber, Katie told her. Selena took the blade, held it to her head, and started to make the cut. But not a few seconds later, the blade slipped, and the whole thing went into Selena's arm. She screamed, but at that moment, her grandmother left the house. Katie, what do I do? Help me, screamed her friend. Katie took the real first aid kit they had at home, pulled out some sterile bandages, and put them on her friend's wound before they treated it all with green tea and iodine. She started winding the bandage. She didn't spare it at all. It took the whole skein on her arm. Selene was in a lot of pain because when they pulled the blade out, they had opened the wound a little. She didn't know how she was going to go home or what to say to her mother. But from that time on, she realized that Katie was a born medic. She really needs to go where she wants to go. That day at home, Selena was scolded by her mother as well as Katie for doing such a thing without adult supervision. What if it hadn't been a hand, but something else, or cut elsewhere, and so on, the parents said. All this time, the girls were friends, socialized, had many different adventures. And finally, the graduation, the end of all classes. Everyone was excited and prepared for this day. What are you going to wear? Asked Selena to Katie. I don't know. Soon we'll go with my parents to buy something. Hopefully we'll choose something, and you. And my mom bought me such a beautiful chiffon dress. I'll probably wear it. Selena, come on when? Katie wondered. She began to remember the last time they had met. It had been in March, and her friend hadn't told her anything then. Just recently, maybe a month ago, now when I was leaving, he said he was coming to visit. Selena remembered Mickey. She felt sad. Wow, girlfriend, we'll be at the wedding soon, laughed Katie. Wait to talk about the wedding. You need to study a little, laughed that one. There was the whole summer ahead of us, where we could walk around and do the rest of our own things. At the end of July, Selena's young man arrived. Mickey, hi, she greeted him. How I missed you, he hugged the girl. Come quickly, I'll introduce you to your friend. Couldn't bear to do it, Selene. They came in behind Kathy, sitting in her yard. I knew you didn't pick bad people, Mickey said of Kathy. Of course, how can I do that? Since I only ever have the best people around me, she giggled. In the evening, Mickey had to leave, and his girlfriends went to see him off. When will you come next time? The girl asked him. I'll probably already wait for you. September is only a month away. It's very hard for me to get out, the young man replied. There in town, he helped his father, moonlighting for him. Okay then. See you later. She kissed him on the cheek. Mickey climbed into the electric train and sped off into the distance. Man, Selena, he's so handsome, her friend told her. Are you jealous or what? Selena even hesitated. No way, what jealousy, just happy for my friend. Katie took a little offense. Come on, let's go home, she took her hand, and they walked down the sidewalk. The month went by very quickly, and the girls were away at school again. Mickey asked Selena to move in with him, but she refused. She was comfortable in the dormitory. Maybe it was fear of the young man's parents or something else that was stopping her. What if you and I got married? Mickey said. Well, when we get married, then we'll see. She wasn't going to do anything yet, no big moves. On New Year's Eve, the girl wanted to go home. She knew Kathy would come too. But Mickey said that Katie should come to their place and Selena should stay here. Selena didn't know whether to agree to that or not, but when she called her friend, she talked her into it. just as she had talked Mickey into it. The guy's house was packed with all the company, and his parents were there too. And after the chimes, he put a box in front of Selena. "What is it?" She looked at him with frightened eyes. "Selena, marry me," he told her with a huff. "Mickey, I knew you would do that. But it's still early. We're only in our second year. There's still so much studying to do. Why rush?" She couldn't understand. "So what would your answer be?" He seemed to miss everything she had just said. "Of course I agree, but I think it's very early." She stood up to him. "Oh kids, I congratulate you." Mom got up from her seat and hugged them both. Katie was happy for her friend too. Selena still insisted on having the wedding in the summer when school was over. Mickey agreed to wait. And so, the next session was over. Selena came back to her place. Kathy was waiting for her at the entrance. "So, friend, when's the wedding?" she asked. "In 3 weeks, as if you didn't know." "Yeah, of course I know. It's just good to see you." They hugged. After that, the hassle began, which was very enjoyable for both girls. Dress, veil, shoes, everything was there. But then the argument began over where the wedding event would be held. Mickey insisted that everything was in his city because he had friends and acquaintances there, and not only him, but also his parents. Selena, on the other hand, said that she wanted to do it in her town, where all her family and friends were. Eventually, the young man relented. Selena was glad that he did. Waiting for the wedding and preparing for it lasted so long, and the wedding itself flew by in an instant. No one even noticed what it was. "I hope we'll live in that town," her husband asked her after the wedding. "Of course we study there," she laughed. "Should we get an apartment or go to your parents' house?" Of course, if money allowed, could rent an apartment. Selena was afraid to talk about it because she thought the guy would think she was mercantile. "First we'll live at my place, and then we'll find an apartment," he concluded. Good, Selena agreed. She had more worries now. Not only did she have to go to school, but she had to do everything at home to please her mother-in-law. At some points, the girl just wanted to lie down and lie down. She was getting very tired. "You're lying down again?" Her mother-in-law told her, even though Selena had just laid down after scrubbing the entire apartment. In general, the woman had a nose for it. As soon as her daughter-in-law sat down or dozed off, she was right there. That's it, I'm getting up," the girl reluctantly said, got up, and went to do her business. After the 3rd year, there was an internship. Selena decided to do it in the same city where she and her husband lived, although it was easier to get a job in her hometown. But as Mickey had said, that was the way to do it. "Aren't you coming over?" Katie called her. "Probably not. I'll do everything here." Selena regretted it too, but there was nothing left to do. "Then I'll visit you for another day," Katie said firmly. "Okay, we'll be waiting," the girls said goodbye. Life went on as usual. All the practices and sessions were over. Selena had to go to work. She was a graduate. Katie had 1 more year to go. "Can I go to my mom's house and meet Kathy there?" "That Kathy, some flighty, bad influence on you," Mickey said and wrinkled his forehead. "Please," she begged him. "Okay," he agreed. They never rented an apartment. They still lived with her husband's parents. It couldn't help but get on her nerves. When her mother-in-law realized that they were staying here for a long time, she began to torment Selena. "Hi, it's been so long since I've seen you." Katie pulled her friend close to her. "And don't tell me, you know how tired I am." Selena took a seat on the bench. "Husband," my friend guessed. And he too. They were sitting right there at the train station talking. "Okay, let's go. You can tell me about it later." Katie stood up and pulled Selena with her. The conversation didn't stop on the way. There was so much news that they couldn't wait to share. They both laughed as they visited Selena's parents first, and then went to Katie's house. "Selena, you just don't look surprised," Katie warned her. "You and your secrets again. You've been like this all your life." The girl's used to it. They entered the apartment where Katie's parents were waiting. A young man greeted them on the doorstep. "Hello." He greeted the guest gallantly. "I'm Carlo." "Celine." She stood looking at him. "Yes, that's my fiancée. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of jinxing it." Katie bloomed with happiness. "You motherfucker." My friend knew this was to be expected of her. They all made their way to the kitchen. There was talk of the wedding. Now Selena was going to help her friend in this endeavor. She'd stayed in this city a few days longer than she promised her husband. "Why?" Mickey asked into the phone. "Katie's wedding is coming up. We need to help." She knew he'd start making up different versions again. "Or did you get a boyfriend over there?" Mickey was very jealous. "What are you talking about? If you want, you can come yourself. Extra hands will not hurt," she'd offered him. "You know I'm working." He didn't listen to his wife's excuses anymore, hung up the phone. Well, my friend was standing next to me. As usual, nothing new. The girl didn't want to talk about it. "Okay, don't feel bad. He's not going to kill you," Katie hugged her. After that, there was no time to think about Mickey, and everything spun and spun. The wedding day was set and the young people were ready. "I'll go home, talk Mickey into it, and we'll come over," Selena promised at the train station. "Okay, we'll wait to see how I am without a witness." They hugged again. Selena was walking up to the house. She wasn't expecting what was going to happen next. "She's here," her mother shouted from the hallway as she opened the door for her daughter-in-law. "Did you have a good time?" "Mickey's out of the room." "And I told you there's a reason she goes there every time," her mother coaxed. "Come on, first of all, my parents are there. Second of all, my best friend's getting married." Selena didn't even get to take her shoes off. "And third, Loverboy, mother-in-law never left their side." "Mickey, I didn't expect that from you." She finally took off her shoes and went into the room. "If you go to the wedding, divorce right away," her husband told her. Then the divorce. She wasn't going to ditch Katie. "There, see how quickly you agreed. And you said you had no one there." He jumped up from the couch. "I don't have anyone there." Celine was already so sick of it all that she wasn't even looking for excuses. "Why don't you call me with you?" the husband continued. Before I could, you swooped in from the doorstep. She turned to him. "Okay, I'll go." He sat back down. "No one minded," Selena smiled. When the husband and wife were getting ready, the mother-in-law was so furious that her son did not listen to her. She talked about how her daughter-in-law had no shame or conscience, but no one paid attention to her words, which made the woman even angrier. "I thought you weren't coming," but Katie was home doing her bridal makeup. If you knew what it was like back home, Selena didn't even want to remember it. "Okay, I came with you." Her girlfriend looked at her through the mirror. At the registry office, everything was fine. Mickey stood by and didn't say a word. But at the restaurant, it started. A young man came up to Selena and asked her to dance. Mickey watched silently as his wife went with him. But as soon as she got to her seat, it started. "Is that him?" the husband asked. "Who?" She turned her head toward him. Then she realized and shook her head negatively. "I see. So, with me you do not dance, and with anyone," went indignant young man. "Did you invite them? They'd start fighting." After that, Mickey didn't speak to her all evening. When we got to my mother-in-law's house, he made a scene there too. "You know, Mom didn't know we had anything wrong with our relationship at all," she told him reproachfully. "He knows now," he said with defiance. "Do you often do this?" the woman asked her daughter in the kitchen. "Lately, constantly." Celine didn't want to talk about it. "It's going to get worse from here," Mom said from the height of her experience. "Okay, we'll figure it out somehow." Selena was already thinking about it herself. After all this, they returned home. Selena was offered a position at the school, which she didn't refuse, because it was impossible to stay at home. She and Katie began to call each other more often. In the last year of her studies, Her friend worked part-time at the hospital, where she had an internship, and then was going to settle there for a long time. In Selena's family, after she went to work, there were scandals every day, and her skirt is short, and she wears bright makeup. Do you do all this to make men pay attention to you? Her husband asked her at home. What are you talking about? A knee-length skirt is not a mini, she showed him. But it's all tight, he parried. What should I wear, a burqa? She covered half her face and left only her eyes. Yes, he nodded, or better yet, stay home altogether. And listen to your nonsense. She went into the kitchen, but there was a new ambush. Why didn't you mop the floors today? Her mother-in-law asked. What floors? I was at work. I just got here. She wanted to come out of the kitchen. No, honey, you're not going anywhere until you talk to me. The mother-in-law closed the aisle. What do you all want from me? She was so tired. She was ready to go anywhere. To make you obedient. Not as you are now, the woman explained. What obedient? Am I a dog or a trained monkey? Selena couldn't help herself. No one said that, you said it yourself, smiled the mother-in-law. The girl pushed her away and went to the room where she and her husband lived. That's it, I can't do this anymore. She threw her things into her suitcase. Where are you going? Her husband looked surprised. Away from your family, as if son together to drive me. She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. Don't go. He almost got on his knees. Stand back. Don't grovel. She stepped around him. Selena, Mickey looked at his mother. Let her go. She'll come crawling back later, the woman said arrogantly. The girl couldn't stand it anymore. She left the apartment and went to her colleague, whom she had befriended not so long ago. She knew that she wouldn't say no. Nancy, hi. She said hello to her as she opened the doors. Come in. What's wrong? The woman saw Selena come in with a large bag. Can I stay with you for a while? Then I'll tell you all about it, the guest asked. Sure enough, she took the bag from the girl's hands and carried it into the room. I'll settle things with work and the divorce now, and then I'll think about what to do, Selena said. Will you leave the collective? Nancy asked. I guess so. I can't be in the same city as Mickey, she said sadly. It's a pity to lose such a specialist. You are young, but you can do a lot of things. The woman shook her head. They sat in the kitchen for a long time, discussing the situation that had happened at Selena's. After that, they went to bed. Both of them had to go to work in the morning. Nancy asked me when she was ready to leave. She always got to school an hour early to get everything ready. Yes, I'll be right back. Just a few more minutes, the one said. The two of them came to the school. Selena decided not to procrastinate and to go to the principal at once. She explained everything. She asked her to finish the school year, and then she would let her go. Selena went to the meeting. Nancy said she could stay with her for that time. Mickey was looking for meetings, but Selena wouldn't agree to them. She was afraid of the fact that she would feel sorry for him. She had put a stop to it a long time ago, and she didn't want anything back. You're so resilient, Nancy told her. If you lived in that family, you wouldn't be like this, she laughed back. She filed divorce papers, with only a year to go until the end of the year. After that, Selena was thinking of traveling to the city where she was born. Don't forget, they were saying goodbye to Nancy. Of course, she left her address and phone number with her. It was a shame to say goodbye to the staff. They were all so friendly, but it had to be done. Selena drove home. Daughter, how did you decide to do that? On what exactly? I don't understand. For everything, divorce, come back. The woman was glad to have her daughter back together with her. I don't know, but it had to be done at some point. Selena didn't want to bring it up. Are you going to get a job? My mother asked. Of course, Celine looked up at her. Not sitting on your neck. Okay. Do you want me to call Sarah? The woman wanted to help her daughter. No, I want to do it myself. I've done it before, she denied it. Good. The mother was glad to have such a mature, sensible, and independent daughter. As she planned, so she did. The very next day, Celine was already sitting in the principal's office. "Sarah, I wish I could work at your school," Selena told her. "Of course, I'd love to take you, but not now. All the seats are taken so far," the woman regretted. "Okay, I'll wait. As soon as something becomes available, call me immediately." She wrote a phone number on a piece of paper. After that, the girl went home. There was nothing to do at all. Katie didn't come for the summer this time. She went straight to work after she got her diploma. Selena was envious that her friend was doing so well, married well, and found a job right away. But she tried not to think about it. 6 months passed. Nobody called from the school. The money Selena had was long gone, and she wondered what to do. "Selena, there's a phone call for you." Her mother put her on the phone. "Hello," she approached. "Selena, hi, it's Harvey, your classmate, remember?" A male voice gibbered in the receiver. "I remember not parts of it," she grumbled. "I found out that you came to our city. I have John, my son. He is going to the 1st grade today, cannot study." Again quickly spoke the young man. "Is it that bad?" She thought, wow, he was the most inconspicuous kid in his class, and he's got a kid going to school. "No, we just want to be safe," he said with a pleading tone in his voice. Good, she thought. Why didn't she think of that before? Not for free, of course, but how much? He continued with his quick story. "Oh, I don't even know. Bring as much as you think you need, and I'll find out later and tell you." She thought it was the first time she was doing it. Maybe it wouldn't work out yet. From that date on, children began to enroll with her. Of course, she couldn't take many, but she had a few regulars. And why go out to school when you can earn money at home too? Her mother praised her in the evening. "I'm so tired." Selena sat eating soup. From the children? The mother guessed. "No, the loneliness, the work, all of it. It's just so monotonous," she sighed. "Call Kathy, go visit, see how things are going," the woman advised. Indeed, Selena had forgotten all about her friend because of her work. And she was good. She had only called a couple of times in a year. Maybe she has her own business and problems there since she doesn't call or come over. Selena thought, calling or not calling. No one is going to hit you over the head. Just call, and that's it, the woman insisted. She herself saw that it was time for her daughter to rest. "Okay, it's late now, and tomorrow I'll be sure to get a girlfriend. If I'm lucky, I'll get a little vacation." She spoke her thoughts aloud. That was fine. Her mom was glad she'd pointed her in the right direction. "Kathy, it's been so long since I've heard from you," she called the next day to a friend. "Selena, hello, how many years? How many winters?" rejoiced her friend at the call. "You know, I wanted to come to your place. What do you think about it?" "Of course, what are you asking? You and I are like sisters," agreed to Taz's proposal. "It's settled then, wait. I'll be there the other day." Selena didn't want to discuss anything over the phone. She knew they would talk about everything when they met. For a few more days, the girl accepted students who went to her. After that, she announced that she was going on vacation and cancelled all classes. She packed her bag. A day later, a train was waiting for her, which would take her to her favorite friend. "And I've been waiting." Katie opened the door. "Hello," they hugged. While Selena was dealing with her problems with her husband and her job, there were a lot of changes in Katie's life too. She got a job, just like she said her husband loved. He got a good job too. "I see you have a full house," Selena said as she walked in and saw how her friends lived. "Yeah, Carlo, you know how Carlo is. He does everything for me, not bragging, just saying girlfriend." "Yeah, you're lucky. How was your evening?" she asked her husband. "You have a great friend," he hugged his wife. "I know that." Kathy was glad it was going so well. She went to her room and lay down as well, needing some sleep after a night on duty. It wasn't until Carlo came in for lunch that both girls woke up. "Wow," Selena looked at her watch. "You can sleep. Carlo laughed at her. It's been a long time since I've gotten this much sleep, she stretched. When the man left, the girlfriends got ready to go for a walk. Your husband said he was going to introduce me to some friend this weekend, Selena told her friend. Probably with Albert, she guessed. How do you know? Did they talk about it? Selena thought it was all Katie's idea. And how could I not know my husband's friends? They are my friends too, she didn't elaborate. Confess your idea, laughed Selene. Why should you sit alone? You'll be in front of the man. He's a very nice guy. Kathy began to praise him. Then why did you split up? Selena wondered. Don't talk to him about it. It's a very bad story. His wife was going out left and right. Almost everyone knew except him. Once, at a corporate party, she was alone. He didn't go with her. And when it was too late, he decided to do a good deed to meet her. He came, and she was right on the street kissing her colleague. After that, they got into the car and drove away. That day, she came home only in the morning. He could not forgive and left. The friend told the story. Wow, there were no children? Selene clarified. No, Katie's gotten sad for some reason. Well, enough about sad things. Come on, show me what you have here and how. The girl translated the topic. All day long they went shopping, did some shopping, and then sat in a cafe. They felt like they had that time back again. When they were still enrolled in this city, it was so heartwarming and fun. So home, Katie got up from her seat. I'm not embarrassing you. For some reason, Selena thought of it just now. What are you saying? You'll get to know Albert. Move in with him. He has his own huge apartment, and there's not enough mistresses there. They walked towards the house. Actually, I came to you for a few days, and you already put me in a man, laughed the girl. We'll get you a job here too. Katie was sure of it. At home, it was the same as yesterday after Carlo came in. Happy talk at the table, and after that bedtime. Saturday came, Carlo as promised, told his wife and Selena to get ready, and he would go to the store and buy everything they needed. Gold, not a man, Selene glared at him. Spit or you'll jinx it, her friend muttered to her. Everything was ready, and they drove off. Carlo had a small house, which they considered their summer house. The view here was fabulous. Selena heard a car making a noise. She turned. It was indeed coming towards them. Here comes Albert. Carlo came out to meet him. Hello everyone. A tall brunette came out of the salon. He took one look at Selena, and she was gone. Come on, I'll introduce you to Katie's friend. Carlo led him to her. Please love and welcome, my friend Albert. He introduced him to the girl. Selene, she blushed. Don't be so embarrassed or I'll start doing it myself, he said cheerfully. Good, she said. All together they entered the courtyard, the men going straight to the brazier while the women busied themselves with the table. So, how did you like him? My friend was curious. Pretty, she didn't mince words. You bet he is. Look at him. What he looks like. That's his personality, Kathy told me. Oh, you think we're gonna make it? Selena wasn't so sure. Albert was really handsome. He was afraid to start a new relationship because he thought he would be treated the same way again as the first time. So, buddy, how'd you like the girl? Carlo was threading meat on a skewer. Yes, she's pretty, cheerful, and modest, he said knowingly. Shall we take it? The comrade joked. We'll see. Albert didn't promise anything. No need to be afraid. Things weren't working out so easily in her life either, Carlo said quietly. I understand, nodded the friend. They were roasting meat that spread its aroma throughout the village. Well, here's to you ladies. Albert raised his glass. And we're rooting for you, the girlfriend said cheerfully. Selene, let's go talk. He offered her his hand. Let's go. She looked at her girlfriend, who winked at her. They went to the swing set, which was right there on the grounds. They were both silent as they walked. Did you come here? He saw her sitting on the swing, walk over to swing a little. Yeah, I hadn't seen Katie in a while, so I thought I'd meet up. Selena liked it here. How long have you two known each other? Albert wanted to know everything about her. Since first grade, once they sat at the same desk, they had never parted again. Selena smiled. He had already rocked her enough. Carlo and I went to school together too, the young man admitted. You're interesting. Selena didn't know why she said that herself. We'll meet again. Why'd you go away? He was curious. Yeah, I'll be staying at Katie's for a while longer. Selena looked in their direction. Carlo said you wanted to get a job here. Albert wondered. They're the ones who want me to stay here. She hadn't had time to think about it yet. And you? He stopped the swing. If only with you. She didn't realize how she'd said those words out loud, just thinking about it. Perhaps the wine was playing tricks on her. Albert froze. He couldn't find anything to answer. He just stood there looking at her. I'm sorry, she's on her feet. No, nothing. Still his stupor hasn't passed. Selena went back to her friends. Now she was cursing herself for her language. Maybe Albert would think she was imposing and wouldn't want to talk to her anymore. What happened? Wondered the friends as they saw that the young man had remained standing there by the swing and Celine had come back. I'm such a fool. Almost crying, the girl said. Explain normally what happened. Did you have a fight? Katie couldn't understand. Nothing happened. Everything is fine. Albert walked over to them and put his hand on Celine's shoulder. She froze and stood like that for a few minutes. Nothing more happened that evening. They talked for a long time. Then Albert and Carlo went to put out the brazier, and Kathy and Selena cleaned up the dirty dishes. And yet, what did you get out of it? Her friend looked at Selena. I'll tell you later, she promised. We didn't get home until the next morning. Albert said goodbye and promised to call. Oh, Selena, if this works out, the girlfriend spoke dreamily. The next day, when all her friends were at work, Selena decided to go to the school to find out about vacancies. And to her surprise, they were there. The principal said she could hire her as soon as possible. Katie, and I got a job, said a happy Selena in the evening. No kidding, was happy for her friend. Selena, you, Carlo called her on the phone. It was Albert. They talked for a good half hour. After that, Selena came into the kitchen all red. What are you, like a cancer? Katie thought they were fighting again. He asked me out on a date. Selena was excited. Everything was going around inside. So that's great news. Katie led her to her room. Get changed. Stop walking around in jeans and sneakers already. The girl put on the dress her friend gave her, shoes, some makeup on her face. She was ready. So that's how ugly ducklings become beautiful swans. Carlo met them in the hallway. What are you talking about? His wife shushed him. I'm sorry, you were already beautiful and now you're glowing. He complimented Selena. She hailed a cab and drove to the restaurant, where Albert was already waiting for her. When she got there, his expression was about the same as Carlo's. Wow, that dress looks great on you. He took her hand and walked her to the table. No need to embarrass me. That, believe me, is enough. She was all red again. Why are you so embarrassed? He looked at her, that blush only adding beauty to the girl's appearance. I don't know, she shrugged. Okay, let's order. He held out the menu to her. Selena had chosen a light salad and meat for the hot meal. Albert had ordered something for himself and some champagne. Selena, after we met, I thought you could stay with me. I realized that you live with Carlo and Kathy. They have a family. You may be redundant, but they will never tell you that. I suggest you move in with me. We'll get to know each other, be close for a while, and then we'll decide if we should start something or not, he said in a businesslike tone that made Selena laugh. I don't even know. No one's ever offered her that before. Think. He poured champagne into glasses. Okay, I need to consult with Katie, best friend after all. She didn't mince words. Okay, now, let's have a nice evening. He sat across from her and kept looking at her. They danced. Selena could smell his perfume. She didn't know why, but it turned her head. Afterwards, Albert walked her home. "Remember what you need to think about," he shouted after her. "Good," she turned and sent him an air kiss. He pretended to catch it and tucked it into his breast pocket. "Oh, Kathy, I like him so much, but I'm afraid to hurry in case he thinks something," she told her friend back home. What would he think if he offered? She didn't understand. "Well, then I agree. You cannot miss this option." And suddenly, in a joint residence, "I do not like it too," Selena decided. "Look how well everything is going. She found a job, met a man. Now just wait for the wedding. And that's it. Everyone is happy," rejoiced Katie. Selena moved in with Albert. He waited for her, prepared a room. The first day, it was kind of awkward. Selena was embarrassed of him. He must have been embarrassed of her. Going for an interview tomorrow, she told him in the evening. "Well done. Break a leg," he rejoiced. "To hell with it," she laughed. After that, he suggested watching a movie. Selena didn't mind that. It was good for the two of them, but it was only the first day. In the morning, she went to school. As promised by the principal, she was accepted there. Everything was going well. Not a couple of days later, Selena was in a new team. "How was work?" asked every evening Albert. He was very attentive. In a few weeks of living with him, the girl realized it. "Very well, as long as I like everything," she replied. "We should get together with Carlo and Kathy sometime," the man suggested. I was thinking the same thing. She was no longer blushing in his presence. The couples called each other over the weekend, arranging to meet at the same place where they had been when Albert and Selena met. "How are you guys doing?" my friend started asking around. "Everything's fine." Celine looked at Albert, looking to him for support. "Yes," he nodded. "You two aren't together yet?" Carlo hurried things along. "Wait, it's still early." Selena started to feel uneasy. After that question, it was never spoken of again. That evening, Albert spent more time with his friend. They were arguing about something, talking. It was good, because the girlfriends also needed to socialize. "Katie, when are you going to make the kids happy?" Selena asked. "Date," she gestured for her to stop. "Why?" My friend didn't understand. "Just," replied Katie sadly. "Carlo doesn't want to," the girl guessed. "No, it's more complicated than that." You could see she was having trouble broaching the subject. "Okay, you can tell me yourself when you want to," her friend hugged her. "We had to get back. Everyone had things to do in the morning." Selena washed her face, said goodnight to Albert, and went to her room. She made the bed and lay down. A few minutes later, there was a quiet knock on the door. It opened and Albert appeared. "May I?" he asked. "Yeah, come in. What's wrong?" She sat up in bed. "No, I just want to spend this night with you." He crouched on the edge of the bed. Wow, Selena had expected anything but this. He had brought a blanket with him, in case she minded sleeping under one. Lay down on the other side of the bed. Why today? She didn't know where to start the conversation, or if it was even necessary. "I realized you're the one I need. I think you've figured it out by now too." He saw the way she was looking at him. "Yes," she said quietly. They lay there like two schoolboys, neither one daring to be the first to do anything. "Selena," he moved closer to her, "I really like you." "And you to me," she felt him hug her. After that, their lips came together in a kiss. It was their first real kiss, which they would remember for a long time. In the morning, Albert got up early to prepare breakfast for his beloved. Usually she did it, but today he wanted to make her happy. "Hey, that smells good." She came out into the kitchen. "Good morning here. Thought I'd make breakfast for you." He stood at the stove. Selena walked up to him and hugged him from behind. "Thank you," she kissed his back. "Aren't you late?" He looked at his watch. "No, I have another whole hour." She sat down on a chair and watched Albert put scrambled eggs on the plates. After breakfast, she quickly washed her face, got ready, and went to work. Albert did the same. He was so happy today that it could be felt physically. "See you tonight, love," he kissed her. Have a good day, she went. Selena couldn't help herself, and already at recess, she called Katie and told her everything that had happened to her last night. Honey, I congratulate you, she told her. Kathy really was happy for her friend. And things were only getting better from there. Albert treated his beloved beautifully, and she reciprocated him. Listen, Selena, I think yours is going to propose to you, Katie said into the phone. What makes you think that? Selena and Albert had been together for a year, but there was never even a hint of it. Yesterday, I heard Carlo talking to him. He thought I was in the bathroom and couldn't hear, my friend explained. And what were they saying there? Selena got worried. Something about a restaurant and a ring. I'm telling you, it's a proposal. Katie couldn't keep it from her friend. Okay, I hear you. Cheeks turning red with joy. Albert was calm until the weekend. They had business as usual. I want to take you out to a restaurant tonight. Carlo and Kathy will be there too, he told her Saturday morning. Okay, I'll be ready, she was calm. She couldn't concentrate on anything at work. Good thing there weren't many classes. She got home early, so there was plenty of time to get ready. Selena tried on all the dresses she had in her closet, but either because of excitement or something else, none of them seemed to fit her. Finally, she chose the one she was going to wear, put it on, arranged her hair, and waited. Albert arrived without delay. The girl got into the car. Let's go. For some reason, Selena began to shake. It was the effect of excitement. Her palms were so cold that it seemed that if she baked something now, she would immediately freeze. How was your day? Albert asked her. Great, she said. You're acting kind of weird. He noticed that she was all clenched up and looking only forward. No, as usual, she tried to speak calmly. Okay. He put his hand on her arm, felt it was icy, but didn't say anything. They pulled up, got out of the car. Carlo and Kathy were already waiting for them. What an event. We might as well have sat at the cottage, Kathy said. Let's go. Not everyone goes to the countryside. We need to have a good rest, Albert called out to everyone. Now it was obvious that he was a little worried himself. The evening went as usual. Everything was already ordered, so the waiter only brought the dishes. At some point, they'd brought champagne. Before that, they had been drinking wine. Friends, I have a confession to make, Albert said. He stood up. In what way? Smiled Carlo. I fell very much in love with this woman, and I wanted her to be my wife, he said and handed Selena the ring. God, Albert, I love you so much. Finally, all excitement gone, she kissed him and put the ring on his finger. Congratulations, Carlo and Kathy said in a voice. Selena drove home happy. She looked at her husband-to-be and couldn't believe that this was even possible. Are you happy? He turned to her. Very much so. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Me too, he petted her. The next day, Selena called her mother, told her everything, and she promised to come. Albert suggested not to make a big celebration, to sign in the registry office and then go to the countryside with friends. Selena was not against it. Mom arrived. Carlo, Katie and a few other people were invited to the wedding. Everyone was happy for the bride and groom, and they looked at each other and were so happy. Well, that's it. Everyone's on board now, Kathy said as she raised a toast. Thank you. Selena walked over and hugged her and Carlo. Yes, friend, I will never forget that. Albert shook hands with his comrade. Life went on. Selena wanted to get pregnant, but it wasn't happening. She went to her friend's house in the evening to talk to her, because she was very close to the subject. You see, Katie, no matter how hard we try, it doesn't work, Selena told her. She spoke again in the quiet voice she'd used before when the subject came up. Will you just tell me? Selena knew that something was going on in the family of friends, but Katie kept quiet about it. Good, she looked straight into her friend's eyes. Well, she waited. When we got married, we were over the moon. This was the family. All that was missing was a baby's cry. But after a year, and then another, and still nothing worked. Katie was silent. Well, not all at once. Selena realized her friend was facing the same problem she was now. I suggested to Carlo that he should undergo a checkup. It was good that he didn't need to go anywhere. He could do it at our hospital, and he agreed. After we went to the doctor, it became known that Carlo would never be able to have children, she cried. Will you calm down? Celine hugged her. I understand and accept it all, but I can't get over it, she said through her tears. You can take an infant. I can't believe you don't have anyone there refusing, Selena suggested. Carlo doesn't want to. He was very upset after that examination too. That's another matter. She realized why her friend was in so much pain. Now you know everything. Kathy couldn't stop crying. Should we go through too? The girl asked her friend. Of course, it's not forbidden to anyone, said the one. That same evening, Selena talked to her husband. He agreed to do it. And a week later, they had all the forms in hand, only to go through the doctors. When everything was done, all that was left was to wait for the results. Are you worried? Albert asked his wife. Briefly, they sat in the hallway outside the doctor's office. When he called out to them, Selena's legs became cotton. She felt like she couldn't walk at all, but her husband was there to help. Yes, indeed, you have some problems, the doctor said and wrote something down. You mean we're not having kids? Selena almost fainted. Why, there is a solution to that problem, the doctor told her. What was it? She was all ears. IVF, he told her in just 3 letters. We agree, while thinking, Selena, said Albert. You need to prepare, read all about it, then take all the tests again and come to the laboratory, said the medic with knowledge. We'll get it done. The husband took his wife's hand and they went home. How can it be, 2 friends, and both of them having such problems, Selena lamented. And what don't you like with what the doctor suggested to us? Even if it won't be the natural way, but still the same, Albert said. Yeah, I agree with you. She's thought about it before. In the evening, Carlo and Katie came to visit them. There were no more secrets on either side. When do you all start? Asked Selena's friend. The sooner the better, she said. Great, and I'll be your personal doctor, Katie smiled. Selena felt like she was jealous. Okay, agreed the girlfriend. What Albert and Selena had to go through. But lo and behold, the procedure had taken place. Now it needed time, whether it would take root or not. How are you feeling? Katie kept calling and asking. It's okay, her friend answered her for the 100th time. Great, no exercise, no intimacy with my husband or anything else, commanded by my personal physician. I obey, laughed Selena into the phone. 2 weeks passed. Selena started to feel her breasts hurting. She called her friend to ask. Honey, I congratulate you. That tells me it worked out, Kathy practically shouted into the phone. Okay, then I'll make an appointment for a checkup, she mumbled. Everything was going well. Kathy counseled every day, and she also took her to her first ultrasound. The woman who conducted it was surprised when 3 other people walked into the office besides her colleague. They were Selena, Carlo, and Albert. All on the ultrasound. She laughed. Yes, Caroline, you've already forgiven us, stepped closer to her Katie. Okay, she rubbed Selena's belly. Congratulations, you have not just one fetus, but a whole. Why did you stop talking? Startled Selene. I don't know, it looks like 2. But what's this? She turned the device a little sideways. So how long? Albert couldn't wait. So far, I say 2, nodded Caroline affirmatively. Great, we were afraid there might be more, Albert smiled. He helped his wife up. Everyone went home in high spirits. We sat there for a while and parted ways. Selena was happy. It was hard for her to go to school, to do her lessons, but she did it. Would you quit your job already? Her husband asked her. You what? I like it, she resisted. Look at the watermelon you're carrying on your back, he laughed, and right afterward, he came over and kissed her belly. She knew he was joking, so she never took offense. When she had to go on maternity leave, she couldn't take it anymore. She spent almost all her time in bed. Albert supported her as best he could. One evening, he got a call from work, saying that he needed to come there urgently. "I won't be long, I promise." He leaned over and kissed his wife. She hadn't been feeling well since this morning. "Please don't go," she held his hand. "I can't." He realized he couldn't leave his wife either, but at the same time, a fixed-term contract. He put on his coat and left the house. He decided that as long as he started the car and stood in traffic, it would be faster to walk. He ran to the road. It was a long way to the crosswalk. He decided he would just cross. He just ran out onto the road. A car came out of nowhere, brakes squealing, darkness. "Selena," I called an ambulance, rushed her to the hospital. Katie came to see her. "What's wrong?" "I feel better now. I have to wait for Albert," perplexed her friend. "Get up, grab what you need, let's go," as if her friend hadn't heard her. Selena obeyed her. She was in charge of her pregnancy after all. She put on the dress. Katie helped with her shoes, and they walked out of the entrance. They were at the hospital in a few minutes. "Look, friend, you just don't worry too much, or it might start early." Katie took her hand. "What happened? Why is everyone running around me?" "It's still early. I'm feeling fine. Just my blood pressure is spiking a bit." Selena looked at the doctors who were here. "Albert." Kathy fell silent. She just couldn't say it out loud. "What's wrong with him?" My heart thumped in my chest. He'd been hit by a car. Carlo had gotten the call an hour ago. Her friend muttered in a trembling voice. "Where is he? How is he feeling?" Selena wanted to get up, but at that moment a strong tingle tugged at her lower abdomen. "Please don't worry. He's in ICU, alive." "But what exactly?" "Will be known later," muttered Katie. But it was too late. Selena had lost consciousness. She was hooked up to all the instruments that were needed. "C-section," shouted Katie already as a doctor. The preparations for the operation had begun, and everyone was fussing. Katie realized that her friend would not be able to give birth easily. She lay there, waking up and then losing consciousness again. "Anesthesia," the command sounded. The anesthesiologist inserted the needle into her back, and Selena, though she was almost unconscious, felt her legs give out. She was laid on the table, an IV in one hand, a machine in the other that took her blood pressure. Katie assisted, and the operation began. Selena couldn't see anything. She was as dizzy as before and sometimes foggy. "What's wrong with my husband?" she whispered with parched lips. "It's going to be okay." Kathy was doing her job. "That's it. You have two wonderful boys," she told her, but her friend was so exhausted from the whole thing that she didn't understand much. Since the babies were premature, they were immediately placed in special boxes. Selena was taken to the intensive care unit to recover a little. "Katie," Selena called out, but no one answered her. A few minutes later, a nurse came over. "What did you want?" She looked at the girl on the bed, who was pale. "Get Katie. Where is she?" Selena thought she was shouting, but she was actually speaking very softly. "She'll be here shortly. Check the IV," and the girl left. In the morning, Selena was moved to a regular room. She still couldn't recover from the shock. "Hi, honey." Katie came into the room. "Where have you been?" Selena was already coming to her senses. "Don't worry, everything is fine. Carlo is with Albert." She held her friend's hand. "What's wrong with him?" Tears came out of his eyes. "He's in a coma, but the doctors say he's going to be fine." Katie tried to reassure her. "How did this happen? And where are my children?" Selena turned her head. They weren't in the room. "They are in a special room. When you feel better, I'll take you there." Katie spoke quickly. "Are they all right?" cried the girl. "Yes, they'll be fine," her friend assured her, like a doctor. The next day, Selena got up. She went straight to them. For a long time, she stood looking at her two sons. "Billy and Barry," she said aloud. Are you naming names? Katie came up behind me. Yes, look how tiny they are. The newly mommy drove her finger along the glass. Everything will be fine, don't worry. Her friend took her hand and led her somewhere. Where are we going? Celine worried. To Albert's. Don't you want to go? Katie stopped. Do you want him to come to his senses? The wife hoped so. No, but I guess if he hears your voice, he'll feel better, the woman speculated. They got to the floor above, and Selena saw her husband. He was covered in plaster and bandages. She came over and took his hand. Congratulations, you've become a daddy, she cried. He can hear everything, Carlo whispered in his ear. He's been here all this time. Sometimes Katie took over, but she had to work and rest. I know, Selena said through tears. She went back to her room, called her mother, told her about everything, and she came to see her the next day. A few weeks passed. Albert came out of the coma. Kathy said that soon the children could be moved to a normal environment. They had grown up and could now do everything like full-grown children. Albert, his wife, came to see him. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you then. He couldn't make himself intelligible, but she understood him. It's going to be okay, she kissed him. And so, after a long time, Selena, her mom, and 2 wonderful babies were home. So, we need to get everything ready here. The woman looked at the room the parents had allocated to the children. The crimp had been bought, everything else too. Albert had to do it all while his wife was in the hospital. But as it happened, they had to do everything themselves. Selena was very grateful to her mother and friends for helping everyone. One day, she was sleeping and had a dream, and in it, she and her 3 children. Then she wondered why there were 3, because she had given birth to 2. In the morning, Selena told her mom. It's just a dream, the woman told her. But Selena began to remember that during the surgery, 3 times, it felt like her skin was being stretched. The first time, there was a baby. The second time, there was a baby. But after the 3rd time, there was nothing and no one. That's what she told her mother. Daughter, Kathy told me you were out of your mind, the woman smiled. So what? I remember all that. Celine squinted her eyes. Probably Kathy would have told you about it, Mother suggested. Katie, her husband, has been diagnosed as infertile, snarked her mother. And what? You think she took the baby from you? I realized what my daughter was thinking. Why not? Selena was being paranoid. So, look, it's all in your head. And where do you think he is now? Mom wanted to reassure her. Hidden away, there was speculation again. Don't talk nonsense. There's so much to do. Albert will be discharged soon, and he needs care. The mother continued with her chores. Hi, how are my puffins doing? Katie's here to visit them. Selena knew Carlo was in the hospital, and if Katie was here too, where was the baby? She shook her head to make the silly thoughts go away. All together they drove this evening. The boys were so pretty. Albert had been released from the hospital. Carlo had brought him home. He was no longer the cheerful man he'd been before the accident. The base of his skull was fractured, as well as his hip joint. He had to be taught to walk again. Thank you for not leaving us, Celine hugged her husband. I'm sorry, they put him on the bed. Now it was as if there was a 3rd child in the house. My mother-in-law and my wife took care of all of them as best they could. The boys were growing up. Albert started to get up slowly, and his wife was always by his side. Come on, darling, one more step. He walked around the apartment. He tried. He did not want to fall in the mud in front of her. Of course, he got tired quickly, but he did it with all his might. Selena, bring me the children, he said, and she went straight for the 2 toddlers, who were already crawling around the apartment. Oh, you're so fast. Dad couldn't handle them. Imagine if it had been 3. Celine seated herself at his side. What are you talking about? It's not the first time I've heard it. Get it out of your head and bring up Barry and Billy. He looked at each. You got it all mixed up again, Celine laughed. Okay, I'll remember soon. He was still very weak. Selena, I suggest you take Albert to the surgery. He'll feel better immediately afterwards. He'll be able to walk normally, Kathy called her. That's what they did. The wife arranged with a clinic. The price was reasonable, and Albert was taken. When the boys were almost a year and a half old, their father walked around the apartment with a cane. Well, tomboys, he stood his ground. Dad, they ran to him. Soon the kindergarten line would be coming up. We'd have to call Mom again, Selena said. I don't mind. Albert loved his mother-in-law. Selena had to go to work, so she called her mother, who was happy to visit her daughter and son-in-law. It was not a burden for her to take care of her grandchildren. Have you noticed that Carlo and Katie have been coming over less often? Selena asked her husband. Here we go again. Calm down already. We would have found out a long time ago if it was as you say. Albert was losing his temper. I don't know, but I'm sure of what I'm saying. Selena stepped away from him. She watched the mother settle the children and grimaced. She dreamed about having 3 children very often, and after that she woke up in tears. But she never told anyone about it again. Everyone just laughed at her. Were you sick again? Albert kissed her. No, it's okay, she replied to his kiss. The boys went to kindergarten. They liked to run and play there. When they were 3, their grandmother went to her place. After that, they were taken there on long weekends. I'm going to go to work, Albert told his wife one day. Are you sure you can do it? He's walking now, but he's still limping a little. Yeah, he was ready to go into battle. Okay, just please be careful, his wife told him. He left, and she walked him to his car. Selena was working now too, and her sons were big, so she had no trouble getting them in and out of the garden. They dressed on their own, and then spent the whole trip telling their mom all about what they'd been fed and what they'd done. Life took a new turn. At home, the special bed Albert used to sleep on was removed. The cribs were also moved to the closet, and now there was a beautiful bunk bed for the boys. Wondering if there were 3 of them, where the third would sleep, Celine stood looking at the rearrangement of the room. Stop fantasizing, her husband, who heard her thinking out loud, told her. Trust me, it's not a fantasy. A mother always feels. She turned to him. Why don't you talk to Kathy directly? You've been friends for so many years. He told her then. What if it really is my fantasies and the man takes offense? Selena thought to herself. They were less likely to go to the dacha with their friends now, either because they didn't have the time or the opportunity. But today, they just wanted to rest, especially since tomorrow was a day off. Katie, hi, Selena called her girlfriend. And good luck to you, she replied with humor. Now I got a call from the railroad station master saying my son was there. She quit as she told me. I don't understand anything. Call your mother, shouted Albert. Selena dialed a number, but her cell phone was out of range, and no one answered her home phone. Lord, really? Come quickly, she hurried her husband. They got into the car and drove to the train station. While Albert was parking and getting out of the car, Selena had already run into the building. She was shown the door. She opened it and froze in place. A few minutes later, her husband came in after her. He too was amazed. Hello, brought them out of their stupor by the policeman. I need to talk to you, Selena told him. She looked at her husband, who was still staring at the boy. Okay, let's go outside. He showed her where to go. You understand, this is my son, but not mine. I mean, I didn't raise him. She began to ramble, not knowing how to explain everything to this man. What are you talking nonsense? You decided to get rid of the child, so have the strength to admit it. He did not believe her. Did you call custody? She asked. Yeah, he saw his partner call the authorities. They'll be here now, and we'll ask him ourselves, Selena breathed out. She was pounding so hard, she couldn't do anything. Hey, Albert came up to the guy. Hello, Alex looked at this unfamiliar uncle, but he wasn't scared. Albert couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him sat a boy who was a carbon copy of his twins. "What's your name?" he asked. "Alex," the guy answered quickly and simply. "Alex," Albert repeated after him. When the guardianship came, they couldn't understand a thing. Selena told them some stories about childbirth and skin tension and everything else. "Woman, have you been drinking?" the oldest asked her sternly. "No, I'm telling you," she puffed up her lungs again. "Wait," Albert came over. "Look," he pulled a picture of the children out of his wallet. Then they couldn't understand anything. "So is this your child or not?" they asked again. "Yes, I gave birth to him, but I didn't raise him," Celine said for the 100th time. "Nothing is clear. We're taking the boy. When you've made up your mind, come and see us." She handed her card. "Let's go to Kathy's," Selena commanded her husband. A few minutes later, they were already at her friend's apartment. Selena couldn't calm down. She was still feverish. "What's the matter with you?" She opened the door for them. "How many children have I given birth to?" Finally, this question did not come as a shock to either her or her husband. "What are you talking about?" Her friend didn't understand. "Just answer the question. How many children have I given birth to? Name a number," Selena thrust at her. "Let's go to the room," she called them. Albert realized that the conversation would not be short. "Speak up already, or I won't vouch for myself," Celine glared. "Stop yelling already. Yes, you gave birth to 3. But how could you know that?" cried Katie. "How, you're still asking? Did you sell it to someone?" yelled her friend. "Crazy, I would never do that." She got up and went to get water. She took it for herself and hid it somewhere. That's Selena's second theory. "What's wrong with you? I'll tell you all about it now." She took a few sips and poured Celine a drink. "I don't want to. I'm listening to you." She pushed the glass away. "When the labor started, you were very bad. I ordered a C-section, but you remember that yourself. One baby was big, he was fine. The second one was a little smaller, but also normal. But the third one had a triple entanglement. He was almost dead. I didn't even show it to you. Can you imagine what would have happened to you? Your husband had an accident. He was in intensive care, and the baby was dead." Katie was crying the whole time. "And where did you put it? Throw it away?" Selena spoke in a different voice. "No, I gave him to the nurse who was there to take him to the doctor unnoticed. She said that the kid was not alive. One lung had not developed, and he would not live till morning. That's what happened. The same nurse came to me and told me the baby was dead. I asked her to bury him. All I did was keep the secret for so many years. I didn't think it would come out." Katie hugged her friend. "Forgive me. And I've thought all sorts of nasty things about you over the years." Selena felt guilty. "So how did you find out about the baby?" Kathy couldn't understand it. Then Selena and Albert told her everything. "Jesus, did he survive?" Her friend clutched at her heart. "It turns out so." Albert quickly walked over and gave her some water. "Let's go." The woman got to her feet. She couldn't drive herself, so they got into Albert's car. Kathy told him the address. It was outside of town. "And who lives there?" Selena looked out the window to where they were going. "That same nurse. She's been out of work for 3 years now. She was old, retired. It didn't go to my head." They drove up to the old house, which was already leaning to one side, got out, knocked on the window. There was no answer, as it was dark outside. No light could be seen inside. "Who are you here to see?" Grandpa came out of the other half. "To Grandma Lucy's," Katie said. "She's gone, dead since spring." He wiped his eyes. "Who did she live with?" the woman asked then. "With me." You could hear he was having a hard time. "How?" She pointed to the house. "Just like that. With us in one half, and her daughter's no-nonsense daughter in the other." He invited everyone to come in. "What's your name?" Katie asked him. "Archie." He led them to the table. "Did you and Grandma Lucy have a small child?" Katie asked the question cautiously. "Alex, was it?" He answered promptly. "Yes, Alex jumped up from her seat. Selena. Oh, such a story. He got up and walked over to the stove. Tell me about it, Albert asked him. Betty worked in a maternity hospital. Some woman gave birth there. They gave her a baby, said she wouldn't live till morning. So she came up with an idea to keep her daughter at home, to bring the baby, and told the doctor that he was dead. And the doctor told her to bury him, so she brought him in and he smoked. But he was premature and sickly. Did the doctor really say he wasn't alive? Katie didn't understand. You know what grandfather Ugraph is like. He will raise a dead man from the grave. The old man clenched his fist. I see. Cue it ourselves. Katie looked at Selena. Betty brought it to Julia, but she refused. It wasn't mine. And that's all. They told everyone then that the daughter had fattened it. She was such a girl. She could stay away from home for months, and we took her for fostering. But we didn't keep her safe, and he cried for real. What's wrong? Albert came up to him. I left the house for the woods, and Klavka took the boy and took him somewhere. The neighbors told me. I saw her later in the evening, silent as water in her mouth. He was still wiping his tears. Don't worry, we found your Alex. They started to leave the house. So where is he? The old man held out his hands to them. As soon as we're done, we'll be there. The man turned to him. At home, everyone was sitting around the table. Now Carlo joined them. What to think? We have to go to the guardianship and get the boy. Albert was the first to speak. It's not negotiated at all, but according to the documents, he has a mother, the comrade said. But Alex has it written all over his face. We even have a witness, he remembered his grandfather. I think the doctor who did the exam will say everything too. Won't keep quiet, Katie was sure of it. In the morning, Carlo drew up a statement to the court. The others came to the guardianship office. Alex was so happy about the guests, and it didn't matter that they had only known each other for a few hours. Alex, are you coming to live with us? Selena asked him. Where's my mom? He looked her in the eye. I'm your mom and that odd just stole you from me a few years ago. She tried not to cry. I don't know. He stepped away from Selena and walked over to Albert. And you're my dad? Yeah, he couldn't sit down, so he just leaned into it. I like you, but what if the real one comes? He still couldn't believe what this auntie said. I am the real me. Look, she showed him a portrait of Billy and Barry. Who's that? He was so stunned that the picture fell out of his hands. These are your brothers, and I'm their mom, she hugged him. Claudia was stripped of her parental rights. The doctor and Katie were removed from their positions. Alexander was reinstated on all documents. He was now Selena and Albert's son. Mom, can you bring the boys yourself? Her daughter called her. Of course, and what happened? She began to find out. I'll explain it to you later on the spot, at which point all the courts were just pulling. Grandma entered the apartment with the boys, and all three of them froze in place. Well, who's the crazy one here? She looked at her mother. Daughter, the mother began gulping air with her mouth. Mom quickly gave her some drops. When everyone had calmed down, the boys went to meet their brother and Celine kept telling them what had happened. How could you? You could feel it. The woman lamented. Mother's heart can't be deceived, she hugged her mom. Yes, I thought that such things are only invented in TV shows and movies, but here it is. It happened to us. You could see that my grandmother is still in shock. Let's go, Celine called out to everyone. Where to now? Her mother asked her. Someone I'll introduce you to. Selena smiled enigmatically. They arrived in that very village to Archie's grandfather. He was sitting on the stoop smoking. So, meet your grandfather's grandchildren. Selena got out of the car. I think I had one. He got back on his feet. And now three, the woman laughed, and one by one, Barry, Billy, and Alex began to get out of the car. Whoa, what's mine? He stood there confused. All three of them, no turning away now, still she smiled. After they had visited the village, Selena dialed her friend's number. You're not mad at me? Selena asked that question first. What's it got to do with you if it's your fault? I'll meet you at the cottage. She wanted her friendship and this party back. Of course, I thought you were the one holding a grudge against me. That's why you didn't call. Selena thought her friend cried. You what? They both laughed. That same evening, everyone was at the gathering. It seemed like everything was the same as before. Only the children were now 3 instead of 2. And where did you put the third one? Her husband reminded her of a question he'd asked her before. On the couch. She looked at everyone confidently now, not like when everyone took her for a fool. It had been decided that the children would not go to school. Alex was far behind, and Selena wanted to get him up to speed in a year. Barry and Billy were happy about that too, and Albert realized that he and immediately said the right things. It was too early for the boys to sit at desks. When not 2, but 3 identical boys were brought to the kindergarten, the teacher grabbed her head. Albert and Selena stood aside and watched their children. They were so happy, even though they had been through so much together.
The highway leading through the wooded area from the village to the main highway was in fairly good condition. But John, who was sitting behind the wheel, didn't press the gas. Even though the bends of the road were not too steep, but he, as an experienced driver, was well aware of how sad the consequences of a sudden appearance of a wild animal in front of the car could be. So the man, having taken the passenger to a cozy remote village, leisurely returned to the city. Besides, it was quite possible to finish the work for today. After all, this order went surprisingly smoothly and brought excellent tips. The amount is quite comparable to the cost of the trip. The elderly passenger, who was helped into the car by a restless young girl, turned out to be very pleasant. At first, the lady, to whom the word old lady did not fit, was reading something on her smartphone, and then she began to look thoughtfully at the landscape outside the cab window. For fun, John sometimes tried to guess the occupation of the person he was helping to comfortably travel by car. Of course, such distractions from the road did not happen too often. But when the situation permitted, the driver allowed himself an innocent amusement and was often right in his guesses. And today he was sneaking glances at the passenger. He began to speculate. Her clothes were nice and fairly new. Her hair was impeccable, even after the woman had pulled back the hood of her light cloak. Understated makeup, some kind of peculiarly straight posture. The woman noticed that the cabbie was looking at her and gave him a direct stare, as if looking straight into his soul. John felt uncomfortable and hastily clarified. Should I change the temperature or leave it at that? The passenger's well-practiced voice was soft, but clear and coherent. Thank you. Everything is fine. John was wondering who this woman with a royal posture, towering in the back seat of his car. He also thought that the passenger, like his mother, had devoted many years of her life to the difficult work of a teacher. Except that the deference and fidgetiness shown by the young escort hinted at a higher status. Maybe the old lady had advanced in her career to the position of school principal, or had been a famous actress or singer in the past. However, the look of this passenger seemed to reject the possibility of extraneous conversations in advance. From the very beginning, John thought that the passenger was a retired judge. He had already had encounters with people of this profession in his life, and frankly speaking, he disliked them. They decide the fates, often without delving into the circumstances of cases, acting quite unjustly. And all this under cover of numbers of articles of laws. Ugh, they think they're gods. When the lady first came out of the entrance, she seemed arrogant, and the driver even felt something very close to inexplicable dislike. Very soon, however, John's impression changed to the opposite. Observing the passenger's behavior, he realized that she was sharply different from those to whom everyone around him is eternally indebted. The woman gently calmed down the girl who was fussily helping her, who had managed to drop one of the bulky bags and was loudly lamenting about the forgotten item. The lady said a polite hello to him, to what a far cry from her customers, and reassuringly wished the remaining assistant a good end to her day. It would seem that these were trifles, manifestations of elementary courtesy and nothing more. For some reason, however, these details pleased John. Here was the end of the trip, which had passed almost in complete silence, when the car had already entered the village. As the car approached its destination, the man saw a radiant smile flicker across the passenger's lips and instantly transform her face. The car passed a boy walking along the curb with a shaggy dog on a leash. This couple, obviously pleased with each other's company, was apparently either familiar to the lady or evoked some pleasant memories. Having parked the car in the specified place, John helped the passenger to take things out of the trunk and wanted to offer to carry them. But a very young boy, running from the gate, beat him to it. After giving the cabbie a hostile look, the young man began to pull out the bags. The lady handed John a few bills and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. "Thank you, a wonderful trip. You drive the car perfectly, as if you could feel it like a living thing. Goodbye." Honesty prevented John from taking the outstretched money, he reported. "Actually, your trip has already been paid for non-cash, so have a good day." The woman smiled. "I know it's for you personally. Dispose of it as you see fit. Go home early, get some rest or something. While I was driving, I read about the cute custom of paying for the next person in the coffee shop. It's called a suspended coffee." Meanwhile, the nimble young man, who was still casting suspicious glances at John, carried all of his belongings and respectfully extended his hand to help me up the steps. The passenger once more offered to the driver. Take it. It would really be fun if you could help someone in need to get where they need to go. Good luck to you." John did not refuse and thanked the woman, said goodbye and drove off. Dusk was just beginning to fall, and the road was a little faded after the recent rain. There was no point in driving with the gas pedal to the floor. No one was waiting for him at the rented apartment. His mother lived in another city and flatly refused to move. It was as if she had put down roots at her job at the school, an institution familiar to every corner, which for several years had been threatened to be overhauled. But the volume of this event was so large that even during the long summer vacation was not to cope. So it turned out that in some offices his mother literally knew every nail in the face. After all, she, together with colleagues and parents, many of whom had to teach, repaired classrooms and corridors, not relying on the generosity of the budget. Her mother had long hinted to her only son that he should move in with her, but John was ashamed to return to his homeland. It seemed to him that the ubiquitous and chatty gossipers would teach and remind him of what he himself had tried so hard to forget. Really, how could one be proud of such a sad experience? Especially when your mother had spent her whole life teaching her children goodness, light, eternal values. These thoughts, which again, uninvited, appeared in his head, made the cab driver's mood worsen. After all, he had not gone to prison because he was a criminal. He hadn't hurt anyone. It was only John's fault for being too gullible that he had to do the time. How proud his mother, father, and wife had been when he'd managed to get a job in a bank after graduation. And how much grief had this supposed good fortune brought to their family. John diligently went into all the nuances of the work and acted strictly according to the job description, but did not notice how he was the only suspect in the organization of a large-scale crime. The cunning manager managed to twist the ongoing investigation in such a way as to get away with it, and John was unable to prove his innocence. The lawyer seemed to try to build a defense, but without success. The father died of a heart attack shortly after learning of the verdict for his only son. His adoring wife, Jennifer, decided to divorce him. Only his mother waited for him and fought for her son to leave the prison walls as soon as possible. After his release, of course, John had a hard time. He didn't get a good job, so he had to make do with casual labor, and then decided that the only more or less reliable hope for stability and financial independence is his ability to drive a car. Thanks to his father, who taught him the wisdom of driving and car care starting almost from kindergarten, having issued a new license to replace the expired ones. The unlucky former bank clerk and ex-convict became a cab driver. Relationships with women somehow did not add up, and in his 30s the man became an inveterate bachelor. To the prospective grooms he could not be attributed, because the wealth of John, of course, could not boast. In addition, purposefully looking for his happiness, he just did not want to. Long betrayal of his wife was still an unhealed wound. Small love affairs ended in separation, and John was not too broken about his loneliness. His mother, rapidly losing her health, was the only person he lived for now. John sent her money regularly, and in the fall he came to help her buy vegetables for the winter. It had only been a couple weeks. How he had parted from his mother after another brief encounter, but the man missed her desperately again. How good and peaceful he felt when she stroked his head as if in passing or carefully adjusted his blanket when he was on the verge of sleep. But John couldn't afford to stay in his hometown and have everyone pointing fingers at his mother or himself. He was afraid he would lose his temper, punish the gossipers and abusers, and go back to prison. No, it was better to come for a few days and then hide from gossip and worried looks in a metropolis alien in spirit and mood, where no one is interested in anyone. Here, even about neighbors on the landing is not known. And John was happy and completely satisfied with it. And having caught up with his memories, the cab driver tried to switch to other thoughts, but there were practically no positive ones among them. The leisurely return to the city was a good time to think about the incidents that had happened to him during the years he had been working in the cab. Not all the passengers had been as complacent as the elegant lady who had left the cab a short time ago. They had tried to rip John off, and they had tried to run away from the car without paying. The stretch of road through the woods had long since ended. A little more, and ahead would appear a series of dacha settlements, which were especially picturesque in spring and early fall. Almost immediately after them, about 15 minutes away, the house where John had rented an apartment would appear. Not so long ago, the traffic had been incredibly heavy, but now that the harvest was almost over and only a few late apples were hanging, the cottages looked abandoned and deserted, and the road was almost empty. John wanted to pass through these not very cheerful places. But suddenly, as he passed one of the stops, he noticed a figure lying on a bench. Nearby was a wheeled cart, a sure sign of experienced dacha dwellers, who, like industrious ants, haul the crops from their dachas to their city apartments. The cab driver did not consider himself an evil person, but he caught himself thinking that the first thing he wanted to do was to press the gas pedal. However, having figured out that the season, when the municipality runs public transport to dachas, was already over, he realized that a stranger could not hope for a shuttle bus to arrive. John carefully slowed down, parked the car on the side of the road to find out maybe the man became ill, needs medical help, or just needs to get to the city. After all, no one was waiting for him at home, and the words of a recent passenger suddenly popped into his head. John got out of the car, stretched his legs a little, and approached the bench. For a second, the cab driver felt uneasy, because the man didn't react to the knocking of the door or the sound of footsteps. "Hey, buddy," John called out. "Are you all right? Alive or what?" The body moved. Then the man turned, sat down on the bench, and looked at the cab driver. John saw before him not a man at all, but a rather young girl, and he looked at the stranger with surprise. Her clothes were even worse than those which country people wear to visit their plots, and were more like those of a scarecrow. The old-fashioned jacket, which was fashionable to wear 30 years ago, was clearly too big for the girl, and the knitted hat pulled low on her forehead looked visibly shabby. The image was completed by the sneakers, which had obviously seen a lot in their lifetime. All in all, the stranger looked like a vagrant or a beggar, like those who sat at church gates. John was in no hurry to draw conclusions. There was no telling what might have happened to the girl's normal clothes. Maybe she had to wear things exiled to the country estate due to some insurmountable circumstances. There was no odor of alcohol. Yes, and in general, the stranger had too clear a look. Trying not to frighten her, John began to speak soothingly. "I don't know if you know or not, but there will definitely be no dacha bus. I listen to the radio all the time, and they said on the news that the season is over. So if you are going to the city, I can give you a ride." In the eyes of the stranger was clearly visible fear, and at the same time there was a desire to be in a cozier place than this wind-blown stop. And in a hoarse voice the girl confessed, "It would be nice to get to town, but I have money only for a loaf of bread." "Don't you have money to pay for it?" John could not help but laugh at the amazing coincidence, and hurried to explain the situation to the stranger, who seemed about to run away. "By happy coincidence, it turned out that your trip has already been paid for by my recent passenger. Especially since I'm going into town myself. It's not all about the money. Sometimes it's good to show a little humanity. Why don't I give you a ride on the way?" The girl's look was still distrustful, and the man, who himself wanted to get home as soon as possible, and not to stand on the highway, experiencing the gusts of the rising wind, had to hurry her. "Here, decide whether you're going or not. I'm not going to hurt you in any way, by the way. If you believe me, let's get in the car and go." "Well, there's no judgment. Maybe some other kind driver will feel sorry for you." The stranger rose abruptly from the bench, picked up her wheeled bag and answered the cab driver. "I'm ready." On the way to the car, John noticed that his companion was obviously cold, although maybe she was shivering from excitement. The cab driver didn't bother to find out why, but simply turned on the heater and concentrated on the road. The passenger, who sat in the front seat next to him, placed her bag in her legs, fastened her seatbelt, and seemed to disconnect from reality. John didn't talk to the stranger, and she didn't talk either. Only when the car was almost entering the city, the man specified, "Where should I take you?" The girl shuddered, as if breaking out of a stupor, and after a few seconds, clearly thinking something over, answered, "Now there will be a 24-hour stall and I can go out. Or, if it's not too much trouble, turn right, and I'll be there in 2 blocks. John was a little confused about the destination. As far as he understood his passenger, she was going to one of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods. A neighborhood built up with temporary housing for workers who were erecting a series of factories. It had lasted much longer than planned in the city, but was now living out its last days. Most of the residents were happy to leave the barracks with minimal amenities. Judging by the numerous houses with lit roofs, the centralized heating had already been turned off, and the dwellings had gone to people who simply had nowhere else to live. The residents of this neighborhood almost never used cab services, unless they were plotting to take the proceeds. Strangely enough, the girl didn't look like a criminal or socially depressed. Literate speech, noticeable even by short lines, clearly practiced observance of traffic rules and manners in general indicated that the passenger was hardly a native of this suburb. Having decided that if to do good, then not half, John did not slow down at the stall, as if he had been transported by time machine from the dashing 90s, when the country was in ruins and the cruel laws of survival came into force. Obeying the girl's instructions, he took her where she asked. There was no limit to the man's surprise. The place where his passenger needed to go was not even a house, but actually a ruin. A woman, whose clothes looked even worse than John's, came out of a leaning door, apparently having heard the noise of the car. The girl, having quickly uttered words of gratitude, slipped out of the interior of the car. The cab driver was ready to start from his seat, when he suddenly saw the woman slapping the cheeks of his recent passenger. Then the inhabitant of the dilapidated building began to pull her bag with one hand, without stopping slapping her. The girl did not make any attempt to actively defend herself and simply hid back, but did not let go of her burden. Sighing and mentally cursing himself, John got out of the car, taking his trusty tire iron with him, and went to rescue the girl. She didn't even react to the appearance of the voluntary defender. But the woman with a saintly beaten face began pouring profanity on the man, generously inserting into her swear words the slang typical of people who had been in places not so remote. This was the first time John was glad that he himself had passed the test of prison time, and he quickly explained to the fierce woman that she was wrong. The man asked the girl, "Are you staying here, or are we going farther?" The young stranger angrily snatched her bag from her hands and walked toward the car. John followed her but turned around several times, expecting anything. Fortunately, the precautions were unnecessary, and soon the cab quietly left the scene of the recent ugly scene. The girl did not cry, but sat tense and sometimes shuddered when the car bounced on the bumps, which were plentiful on the outskirts of the city. Silently handing the passenger wet wipes, John concentrated on the road and then offered, "There's a social shelter on the other side of town. They help people in difficult circumstances. If you want, I'll take you there. They have strict rules, but every point is absolutely fair. You can't bring any booze with you. That's the most important condition. And they'll make you work too, but you don't have to pay any money. Contributions are only on a voluntary basis, and they can be made even after a difficult period of life left behind. They helped me out a lot in my time. If it hadn't been for their support, it is unlikely that I would have been able to quickly get out of the hole in my life." The female passenger whispered so quietly that John didn't hear and asked again, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand." The girl repeated, but louder, "Are you tired? So don't think about me. Just give me the address of this shelter and I'll get there myself." John looked at his watch and began to think out loud. "Of course, I could invite you to my place without a second thought. But I live in a rented apartment, and the landlord is strictly forbidden to bring strangers without his prior approval. Look, why don't I drive you to the shelter? There's always someone on duty there, and if you're lucky, someone you know. They'll help you get checked in quickly. Do you have your papers?" The girl nodded in time with the doggy on the dashboard and, realizing that the cab driver's kindness had long since gone beyond the simple desire to give a hitchhiker a ride, began to thank him confusedly. Interrupting the flow of thanks, John asked, "Listen, what's your name, Emily?" "Emily," the passenger whispered. The cabbie hummed at this unexpected correction and introduced himself in response. "Well, I'm John. That's how we met. So pardon the imposition, Emily. But I'm going to ask you a question that's been bothering me. What are some of the sins you just got slapped for?" Even in the encroaching darkness, somewhat dispersed by the glowing instruments, it was noticeable in the parlor how embarrassed the girl was. "That's a long explanation. And to make a long story short, I didn't bring any money or groceries. And in general, I left with my documents, which is strictly forbidden. I myself do not understand why I went back there. I don't know why I went back there." John asked again, "Is that your home there? Or is it some kind of voluntary slavery?" The cab driver didn't wait for Emily's answer, because the girl cried, interrupting the silence with sobs. John parked outside the store and turned to the passenger. "You sit here. I'll go get some groceries. I don't feel comfortable driving empty-handed. Help is always welcome there." Emily didn't even seem to notice John's words. He returned, loaded the bags into the back seat, and the girl had already calmed down and even apologized. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My nerves are a little frayed." The cab driver nodded, letting her know that he understood, and when he had already driven Emily to a well-known shelter, he dared to bother her again. Everyone made it. John took his bag, and they went to get Emily settled in for the night. Afterward, she would decide where she wanted to go. To John's delight, a good friend of his was on duty at the shelter that evening. The old woman opened the door and greeted his former ward cordially. "Oh, John, it's been a long time. What brings you to our land, still working as a driver? Don't you get bored? Come in, darling. I've just made some tea. Take your time. Sit with the old lady, tell her the news." John, putting the bags on the floor, hugged the woman who had always treated him in a motherly way. And she, still talking, noticed a crying girl behind the ajar door and stretched out. "Yes, I see you didn't just drop in to see me or bring some goodies. Come on in and tell me what happened." The cab driver introduced his passenger to the shelter attendant on duty. "Here's our Deborah. I was lucky, although everyone here is a wonderful person. But I'll tell you in confidence that Deborah is the best. There are no unsolvable problems for her, and she always finds wise words to support and comfort. Deborah. And this is Emily. I only met her today, but as far as I can tell, she clearly needs a roof over her head. At least for tonight. And of course your advice, as always, will come in handy." The attendant led the guests into the kitchen, and as she sorted through the packages, she had time to run errands for John and Emily. "Emily, if there are any papers, let me see them. And you, John, take a set of clothes for Emily from the pantry. We keep all sorts of things, and show her where she can wash up. And if she wants to, she can take a shower too." While Emily cleaned herself up, the nimble Deborah set the table with John's help, persuading her former ward to eat dinner as well, scolding him unmercifully. "I know you probably haven't had anything hot but coffee today. I poured both Emily and you some delicious chicken soup with homemade noodles. Let's sit down and have a quiet dinner. Then we can talk. It won't do any good on an empty stomach." Emily, washed and changed, looked even more youthful than she had in the tramp's clothes, which Deborah, with her permission, had already taken to the small room equipped as a laundry. Her passport said she was only 18, but she didn't look it. The overly curious residents of the orphanage who stopped by the kitchen to see who had come to visit so late, Deborah gently sent them to their rooms. "I realize there's not much entertainment here, but we're not here for a performance. You'll get to know each other tomorrow." The woman was obeyed unquestioningly, and she continued to treat John and Emily. When the guests had had enough, Deborah tactfully clarified. "Emily, I realize you don't feel too comfortable right now. You think I'm going to interrogate you. But trust me, you have the right to tell me as much as you feel you need to. If you don't want to say anything at all, that's okay. Sometimes it takes time." But it seemed as if the girl wanted to say something herself. She began her story by thanking John. "Thank you for picking me up at the bus stop. And then when they saw the ugly scene, they didn't leave me to my fate. They brought me here, where I finally made myself look like a human being. I decided at the bus stop that I'd rather be here than go on living this pointless life. And then you showed up. like an angel, even though I didn't deserve to be saved. I came to this cottage for a reason. I thought there was no one there anymore. And I was caught. It's good that the women who detained me didn't call the police and didn't beat me up. They just let me go. They even gave me some apples, but strictly ordered me not to appear in that dacha village again. So I lay down on the bench, feeling ashamed and bitter. Although the weather was not hot, I was terribly embarrassed about the fate I had arranged for myself. Deborah, who had listened to hundreds of confessions, was silent, realizing that the girl was preparing to tell the details of how she had become homeless. John decided to be supportive with words and encouragement. "So you're still very young, Emily. There's time to make things right." However, the cab driver's words had an unexpected effect on Emily. The girl cried, but without hysterical sobs. Then she explained to John and Deborah, who had arrived. "I have already regretted 1,000 times the things I did 6 months ago. It all started when I met Michael. A funny, charming guy, I thought at the time. After classes at the institute, he met me while we were walking home. So entertained me that my stomach ached from laughter. Then I fell head over heels in love with him and started skipping school. What kind of classes could there be when spring was raging and the guy was asking for meetings? Of course. My parents strongly discouraged me from hanging out with Michael. My father said that my favorite is some kind of murky, asked me to give time to collect all available information about Michael and even a little more. My mom begged to listen to my dad's idea too, saying that she had a bad feeling about it and that my obsession with Michael worried her. She hinted and even said outright that he was an Alfonso and would break my heart by betraying me. But I only believed the one I loved. Michael was so convincing that he loved me. Of course I believed him. Not my parents' suspicions. Some usurer of doubts appeared, but I was quick to deal with him. In response to my direct question as to whether his interest was self-serving, Michael even took offense and disappeared for a few days. I was so hurt that once he reappeared, apologized, and started kissing me. I fell in love with him even more. My lover and I started meeting secretly because he lived in a hostel and there was nowhere to bring me. About meeting Michael's parents was out of the question. They lived in another state, and my lover planned that when he had a vacation, we would go to them together, in my hometown. I was terrified to appear with Michael in crowded places, so that my parents would not find out about the continuation of the relationship. Amelia, a longtime friend of my mom's, was so supportive. She even gave me her own apartment to go out with Michael, said I was old enough to make my own life. I couldn't keep the secret about the meetings for long. One day I came home, and it was announced to me in an ultimatum form that this connection must necessarily be cut off. I did not give in. The quarrels in our apartment grew more and more frequent, and it smelled of sedatives. I showed up there less and less often, though. Sometimes only to sleep over if Amelia's apartment was occupied. My mom was giving me a hard time. Dad threatened to withdraw his financial support. And I was already making plans for married life with the man I loved. I was convinced that I was old enough to have a serious conversation with my foster parents, and it was time to figure things out and live my life. How betrayed and hurt I felt. How so? Because not only had my parents lied to me all my life, but they also wanted to take away my love now. You bought me like a toy and kept me away from my own mother, playing the role of benefactors. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was clearly not in my right mind that I came to the apartment where my childhood had passed. And instead of having a calm conversation, I began to reproach those whom I thought were my parents and curse them for their lies. Emily cried quietly, repeating that she had always wished me well. John sat with a defeated look on his face, then left for the kitchen, probably to avoid listening to my accusations. The woman who had taken me to daycare treated me, taught me lessons, had tears rolling down her cheeks, but those incessant drops didn't touch me at all. I managed to get my real mother Deborah's address from her. John came back with 2 glasses filled with a stinking liquid that smelled like valerian, and almost forced us to drink the sedative. I continued to play the accuser. You're used to buying everything, but money doesn't make you gods who are allowed to decide everything for others, I shouted. My mom did something to calm me down, or maybe it was the sedative. I turned around and went to my room. That was the last night I saw the people who had raised me. During the night, I packed up some of my things, all the jewelry I'd given them, and, in what I now repent, I took the money. My parents never hid their savings from me, they trusted me. And then I even justified myself that it was a moral compensation to me for their lies and interference in my relationship with Michael. Without even leaving a note, I left the apartment. I had two goals: to find my birth mom, Deborah, and start a happy new life with her, my brothers and sisters I had been separated from, and of course with Michael. I was not even frightened by the prospect of moving to another city, because my beloved will find work everywhere. I believed that, and I didn't feel bad about dropping out of school. Why would I need a diploma if I had to sacrifice my love for it? I was sure that my lover would support me, so I called him. We met. I confusedly explained what had happened. I invited him to come with me to search for my biological mom, to support me in a difficult moment. But he apologized, saying he had to be at work in the next few days. Michael comforted me, promising to stay in touch. We also agreed that he would find us a rented apartment with the money from my parents' inheritance. I left a little for the road, and the rest of the rather large sum and a bag of jewelry I gave Michael so as not to lose it. After a heated embrace, we parted. It's long to tell how much and by what means I had to search for my birth mom. Fortunately, I had money and rented a room in a nice cozy hostel. I called Michael every day. He sent me photos of apartments for approval. But our conversations were short, a few minutes each. My favorite explained all the hard work and careful selection of our future family nest, and I, tired of fruitless searches, was not the best conversationalist. My biological mom, as it turned out, had managed to change her place of residence several times. And of course, I noticed that the neighborhood was becoming less and less prestigious with each move. After about a week of searching, I reached the dilapidated house where you, John, drove me today. I had accomplished my goal and finally met my birth mom. Strangely enough, she recognized me as soon as I opened the door. "My golden one," she screamed. "My baby girl, my darling. I've been waiting for you to find me someday." We cried for a long time, sitting in each other's arms, unable to talk. Mom confessed that she considered parting with me the worst mistake, for which she had to pay a heavy price. She didn't go into details, but it was obvious that she was addicted to alcohol. When my mom admitted that of my two brothers and three sisters, none of them were in touch with her, I of course immediately suggested that she move in with me. Mom agreed. In high spirits, I told Michael about the long-awaited meeting and asked him to find a bigger apartment. At first, he seemed to share my emotions, congratulated me, rejoiced, but the next day he stopped contacting me. It was impossible to call him, and I was worried that something had happened to him. I couldn't find a place for myself. I didn't have any close, trusted friends, so I called Amelia. Instead of support and help, I received recriminations and accusations. A friend of my foster mom's told me that tragedy had struck. The man I thought was my father had suffered a stroke and was in the hospital. Amelia recounted the circumstances that led to his stroke. It turned out he had gone to the police to file a theft report against me, but hit a tree on the way. My foster dad suddenly felt sick. Fortunately, the speed was low and there were no other casualties. Amelia said that her friend, my foster mother, called me an ungrateful creature, a creep who was the reason my entire well-being was ruined. I didn't have the strength to object. In my heart, I knew that all the insults were well-deserved. I asked Amelia for the number of the hospital, but she strictly forbade me not only to come to town, but even to contact my foster mother. She claimed it would only make things worse and could take away her friend's health as well. Amelia begged me not to call the foster mom, lest she be sent to a hospital bed or, God forbid, to the next world. Hearing me sobbing into the phone, Amelia softened and promised to let me know when the situation was more favorable. She also agreed to go to Michael's dorm to see if anything bad had happened to him. I waited impatiently for news. Soon I heard from Amelia that Michael had been offered a lucrative 6-month shift, and he had left, leaving some of his belongings behind. I calmed down a little, so my lover was fine, and anything could have happened to the phone. I'd called Amelia about once a month for 6 months now, but she asked me not to disturb the people I'd disappointed. I asked her to tell her on my behalf that I was sorry, but she said I was not yet forgiven. I asked if I could come, and she said it was too soon. The foster father needs to get stronger and the mother needs to calm down. Michael still hasn't contacted me, even though by my reckoning he should be back by now. I have to admit, I'm beginning to suspect that he won't even show up. More and more often I think that he turned out to be a fraud and, having embezzled the money and jewelry received from me, just decided to hide. Not only that, but my relationship with my biological mother began to deteriorate as I ran out of money. I sold my smartphone and bought a simple phone instead. But of course that's not enough. The biological mother works unofficially. Or rather, she's trying to work until she gets fired for absenteeism. She set me up to sort of support her. In addition, there were fights because her roommate started to show interest in me. So she tries to see me less at home. And today she sent me to the cottage to clean up the mess. The fact that I came by car made my mother mad, and John witnessed the ugly scene. She slapped me in the face. When she heard that I hadn't managed to bring anything from the cottage, she started to take away my bag. I had my cell phone and passport in it, so I clutched at the handle like a drowning man clutching at straws. These things were my last hope that everything would work out, my last link to the people who were really close to me. It's a good thing you, John, didn't go and get me out of there. I myself realize how wrong I was to take money from people from whom I saw only kindness and care. It turns out they were right about Michael, too. I wish I'd believed them and hurt them by doing that. It was her own fault. But the punishment the foster parents received for their kindness was completely unfair. If Emily had been a little braver, she would have gotten down on her knees and started apologizing. But she feared that they really had cut her out of their lives and didn't want to see her. Even more, she feared that her father would be made worse by her appearance, especially since she couldn't pay back the money she'd taken. Emily was silent. Michael didn't say anything either. Deborah shook her head and didn't beat around the bush. The girl had made a mess of things. But I'm not judging. A young crush can sometimes push even much wiser people into rash behavior. You know, Michael, Emily is absolutely right to apologize to the people who raised her. I understand that she fears their reaction, but it's better to apologize in person to their faces than to cowardly make excuses through an outsider, even a close family friend. Torturing people like this and living in uncertainty herself is wrong. Her biological mom, as I understand it, needs to be rescued from alcoholism. But unfortunately, you can't help someone who doesn't want to. Forcing healthcare against one's will is a hopeless endeavor. There's flavored tea in the cup. Deborah turned to Michael. Michael, are you on shift tomorrow? Realizing what the orphanage attendant was getting at, the cab driver completed her thought by suggesting Emily. How would you feel about going to your town tomorrow morning without putting it off? Especially since tomorrow will be Saturday. Do you think your parents will be home? The confused girl couldn't believe that right now she had a chance to try to correct the mistake she had made. So she nodded silently. Deborah smiled contentedly. Well, if you have to travel to another city, then you should have time to rest. So Emily, I'll organize a sleeping place for you. Michael, I suggest you stay too. There's a spot on the couch in the break room. Or do you want to go back to your place? Michael, after some thought, decided to stay at the shelter. We'll leave from here tomorrow morning. I don't see the point of driving back and forth across town. So, Deborah, I'll take you up on your kind offer. It seemed to Emily like a miracle she'd given up believing in. The desk clerk put the girl up for the night and went back to Michael. As much as he wanted to talk more with the wise Deborah, she firmly ordered him to rest. Michael, you know I'd love to talk to you, but you have to be on the road tomorrow. If you could just be supportive of the girl. Well, the fact that she trusted a scumbag man, that's every other girl in the orphanage. But the story about the money she took from her foster parents is a little more serious. It's a good thing Emily didn't shy away from it. Although it would have been easier to keep quiet and create an all-white and fluffy image. So she's a good girl. You should watch her. Michael just waved her off. Oh, Deborah, do you all need someone to team up with? I have a history of prison. You know that. And we're almost 12 years apart in age. No, Emily's beautiful, but she's not for me. And after my divorce from my wife, I can't find the strength to trust a woman again. Duty blushed with indignation and began to jokingly reprimand the former ward. How did you generalize the entire female sex? Don't take offense. And in general, go and rest. Tomorrow morning, load into the car and go. Michael had no choice but to obey. In the morning, Emily was incredibly nervous, and only by a miracle managed not to spill hot tea served for breakfast. Poor thing's nervous, Michael thought. But he didn't know how to support his casual companion who had come into his life so abruptly. John realized that he did not feel any romantic feelings for the girl who frankly told about his ridiculous love, but for some reason he really wanted to help her. He called the dispatcher to explain that he wouldn't be coming into work. After a quick tidy-up and a delicious breakfast, he took Emily to her foster parents. The cab driver didn't bother the girl with conversation and only asked if she would mind a softly turned-on radio. The hour-and-a-half ride passed in silence, which reflected Emily's tension. John could see that she was questioning the appropriateness of her intended visit. "Emily, if it's appropriate, I could go with you," he suggested. "As a sort of moral support. I promise I'll be there for you." There was a glint of hope in the girl's eyes. "Of course, I'm an adult, and I have to take responsibility for my own misbehavior. But I'd appreciate it if you'd come with me. It's not that I need your help to defend myself against the just anger of Mom and Dad. It's just that I'm afraid, as Amelia warned me, that one of them will get hurt. In that case, your help could be invaluable. A quick trip to the hospital if necessary." John saw Emily's hand shake as she pressed the intercom button. She probably would have run away if he hadn't been there when she heard a woman's voice on the speaker. "Who?" The girl answered as if all her strength had left her. "Mom, it's me, Emily. Emily, my girl." The voice in the speaker was ringing with joy. "Come in quickly." The door opened, and John followed Emily, who did not wait for the elevator, and jumping over the steps, strove to get to the people whom, it seems, did not cease to love. On the platform of the 4th floor, the girl literally ran into the arms of a crying woman and a man carefully supporting her by the waist. For a few seconds, only separate words were heard: Emily, Mommy, Daddy, in various variations. John felt awkward, but then a man who appeared to be Emily's adoptive father caught his eye. Coming to his senses, he called everyone into the apartment. "Ladies and you, young man, let's go to the apartment." Embarrassed and touched by the family scene, the cab driver had no chance to refuse, for he had promised Emily to stick around. The whole company moved into a cozy, spacious apartment. The woman, as if her life depended on it, hugged Emily again, and the head of the family extended his hand, introducing himself. "My name is Thomas, and this woman is Amber, my wife. And what's your name?" John the cabbie replied. Thomas led his guest into a spacious room with bookcases along the walls and seated him in a comfortable chair, explaining, "It's a pleasure to meet you. You appear to be my daughter's companion, and I'm very grateful to you for bringing her home. We've been waiting over 6 months for her return. Amber wanted to go after her. We knew where she was going, but I told her not to. Emily had always been independent, and she needed to get to the point of wanting to come home on her own. Let your wife and daughter have a little time alone together. In the meantime, tell me honestly, do you have serious intentions toward Emily?" John didn't lie and confessed. "I, except for the desire to help your daughter, had no other intentions. I met her yesterday by chance and I felt sorry for her. She was obviously in a bad situation and didn't know how to get out of it. I had the time and the opportunity, so I decided to do what I could. And it wasn't much, believe me." While Thomas and John had been having a lively conversation, Amber and Emily had apparently calmed down, and the lady of the house invited the men to the table. "Come on, let's go celebrate. We made an order in advance in the nearest cafe, and everything is already prepared." John tried to refuse, but he was persuaded to stay at the table. Emily touched Amber's and Thomas's hands repeatedly, and then began to apologize. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry if you can. I'm such a silly girl." The girl, whose tears had just recently dried up, cried again. Amber stood up and hugged her daughter, comforting her. "Come on, sweetie. Daddy and I aren't mad. The only thing is, we were so worried, not knowing where you were or what happened to you. We've been waiting for a phone call from you. If you just keep your mouth shut. It would have been easier for us. Or, if you couldn't overcome yourself, at least call someone you know and let them know how you are and what's going on." John was surprised beyond belief. After all, judging by yesterday's story, Emily regularly called her foster mom's friend, and he silently voiced his bewilderment aloud. "Emily and Amelia were in regular contact. Your friend told her not to bother you, said it wasn't the right time to talk, claimed you were here, almost cursing her." Amber was painful to watch. She was truly shocked at this unexpected turn of events. "Actually, Amelia's been out of the country for 5 months. And since then, we've only talked to her by email. She keeps calling me to visit, to get away, to relax." Emily looked just as shocked as her foster mom. "I don't understand." Amelia at the last conversation a month ago told me that visited you just the day before and that you are still not ready to accept me with apologies. The girl shifted her gaze from Amber to Thomas, who soon asked her daughter in a strange tone. Emily, call Amelia. Find out how she thinks our apartment is doing. Emily put the phone on speaker, and soon a woman's voice, full of concern and tenderness, came into the room. Emily, it's so good to hear from you, my dear. Unfortunately, I can't give you any good news. Thomas is still not well. He's back in the hospital, and the doctors even hint that his days are numbered. Amber doesn't want to hear from you. When I mention you to her, she cuts the conversation off and moves on to another topic. So girl, you're just going to have to be patient a little longer. Thomas put his finger to his lips, urging his wife to be silent. And Emily surprisingly coolly clarified. Amelia, pardon me for clarifying, but when was the last time you were at mine? Is this current news? The voice from the phone answered after a long sympathetic sigh. Just visited yesterday. So the news is up to date. There's no point in coming back for now. Only Amber will probably go to a hospital bed too. But don't despair. Call me if you need anything. Emily said goodbye to her foster mom's friend and turned to her dad. How come? Amelia so confidently reported that you were in the hospital and was so worried about Mom, who might have gotten hurt too because of my appearance. Amber added. And about just being at our house yesterday, she said that too. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that Amelia wasn't trying to help and support us at all, but was pursuing her own interests, and we don't know where she really is. Maybe she's not abroad at all. Thomas, as if remembering something, asked John. Excuse me, but could you give me a ride to a place and back? I can't ask a question that needs to be solved over the phone. The cab driver, who himself was wondering what kind of game Amelia was up to with Emily's family, agreed without hesitation. When they arrived at the address Thomas had given them, John gave his passenger an attentive look. Emily's adoptive father could have been, in his opinion, a lawyer or a mid-ranking official. And the cabbie was leaning toward the second version after all. Not 15 minutes later, Thomas returned to the cab. The man looked dejected and shared his worries with John on the way home. Anyway, it looks like it was Amelia who was involved in Emily losing her head over that sneaky Michael. I just found out that it was none other than my daughter Emily's boyfriend who was in the seat next to her on the plane. That's a little too unlikely for a coincidence, don't you think? And this Michael won Emily's favor too easily, playing on common interests and tastes. She didn't like him, as I recall. And Michael and I had no idea that our girl had been charmed at the instigation of that sneaky Amelia. How cleverly she kept Emily at a distance from us. How masterfully she played on her feelings of guilt. I don't know how I'm going to tell Michael and my daughter. John, caught up in the tangled story, had to stay with Deborah's family. Thomas, softening the news, explained to his wife Amber and adopted daughter that Amelia's actions are like a premeditated action. All the coincidences were too coincidental to keep us apart. I just don't understand why she did it, he said to his wife. Do you have any thoughts about the motives of your so-called friend? Except for self-interest, of course. It could have been easier to get money out of us, but she so froze to hurt us. The woman was confused. I don't understand. We didn't seem to have any big fights. I've always helped in any way I could, unless. Amber stopped talking and Thomas rushed her. Well, is there something you've stalled on, a thought you've had? Well, when you and I started dating, she tried to beg me to give you up to her. But after I said no, she seemed to calm down. But a 25-year-old grudge can't be the cause of this nightmare we've been living for months. Taking advantage of the silence in the room, John hurried to say goodbye, connecting with his family. Well, I wish you all happiness. Goodbye. Thomas once again thanked the cabbie for his concern. Amber handed over a bag of tissues from the cafe. These aren't even open servings. Take them. Don't say no. At least it'll save you a few times the trouble of cooking. John was returning to New York, which had become his temporary home, and he was glad that he had not passed by someone else's misfortune. May harmony be restored to their family in spite of all their trials, he thought. He wanted desperately to go to his mother's home in Chicago, but instead he overcame a momentary weakness. The man contacted the dispatch, and he even managed to take a few orders, just to delay the moment of returning to the apartment, where no one was waiting for him. As in a whirl of orders, John did not think about Emily and her family. But one evening he got a call from Deborah. "John, hello, I'm calling to warn you. There's a situation. A very distinguished-looking man arrived at the orphanage an hour ago. He said he was Thomas, the father of that girl Emily. Remember, he brought some stuff as a thank you. I don't know what for. And then he asked for your phone number. I left it in my office under false pretenses, so I thought I'd call and ask you. Did you have any problems with this passenger? Can I give this unexpected guest your phone number?" The cab driver was surprised, but answered, "It's fine, my dear Deborah. Thank you for your concern. By the way, it was talking to you that helped Emily decide to go to her parents. So consider all these gifts as payment for your psychological help. Feel free to give me my number." Thomas seemed like a great man. And the fact that he brought things to the shelter says a lot about him. Shortly after John finished talking to Deborah, he got another call. It was Thomas, offering to meet at any convenient place and time. The cab driver, who was just going through a lull in bookings, didn't refuse, and soon the men were comfortably seated at a cafe table. The loud music playing in the hall did not interfere with the conversation. Thomas took the initiative, suggesting, "John, how would you feel about changing jobs? You can't always be driving. It's a dangerous profession from every angle and not very healthy. I suggest you join my firm. There's a good vacancy in the commercial department for a good man. And I see you in that position." The cab driver was dumbfounded, but decided to come clean. "Thomas, I realize I can't drive a cab for the rest of my life. But you'll take back your offer when you hear about my criminal record. An economic conviction. Of course you won't believe this, but I wasn't really in jail for anything. Actually, it was for being too trusting. So thank you for your kindness for the offer. But we won't be able to cooperate." But Thomas is suddenly interested. "I'm very curious. I have a lot of good lawyers who can get justice. So it's quite possible to achieve full rehabilitation and even compensation," John admitted. "To be honest, I don't believe in justice at all anymore. I have a mother, so much money invested in trying to justify me, that it is terrible to remember. Only a good apartment had to be exchanged, and it was no use. I'm afraid it won't work now. Except for dashed hopes. Except that John did not take into account the character of the military father, who is accustomed to fight for the truth. The man made a suggestion. "How about this, you give me all the data on your case? I insist on that. At the same time, you take a vacation in your cab service and take an internship, paid by the way, at my firm. If you like it, you'll get a job. If you don't like it, we'll part on friendly terms. I don't think you're risking anything, and neither am I. But it's a chance to make a difference. How's that?" John couldn't resist such possibilities and answered, "It's a deal, Thomas. Thank you very much." "You're welcome for now," the man smiled. "I'm with my wife before you. And Deborah owes me a debt of gratitude for bringing her daughter home. So this is only a small part of the thanks." John took Thomas's advice, and after a brief conversation with the cab driver and the landlord, he packed his bags and moved to the city, where a new job awaited him. Amber helped him find a place to live. And John felt as if he had wings at his back from the fact that people he didn't know suddenly took such an active part in his fate. After a preliminary call, John met with a lawyer. To the surprise of the former cab driver, his case was taken up by a charming blonde in a colored artificial coat, which did not give the impression of an intricate connoisseur of the law. But it turned out to be a delusion. "Don't worry," she explained to John's puzzled look. "My appearance is just an extra effect to deflect the eyes of my opponents. I'm just coming back from a meeting, and without too much modesty, I'm bragging that justice has won." Then the woman instantly adopted a businesslike tone and suggested to her new client, "John, let's see what's in your file. And then you calmly and honestly, without hiding any unpleasant moments, tell me everything. Let's see what ideas come up." John did not really believe that after years it would be realistic to restore justice. But the lawyer turned out to be a real fury in fighting for his case. She was so meticulously analyzed all the circumstances that it became almost obvious to the man his name, although late, but still will be cleared of shame. Even if everything was not very fast, but the result was worth the wait. John was incredibly proud to tell his mother that now they do not have to be ashamed of the sad fact in his biography. "Mom, you can imagine the lawyer got justice. Not only that, but I'm also entitled to monetary compensation. so you could look for a more comfortable apartment. The elderly woman was incredibly happy for her son, to whom it seemed that luck finally turned to face. She confessed, "Oh, Sonny, and I was stupid, and did not believe that so everything will work out. I thought again, upstart money, even if not from us this time, but from your boss, Thomas. Hey, John, thank God everything worked out. It's just a shame you didn't meet these wonderful people sooner. Then maybe your father would be alive and well now. Hey, but what's to think about now?" John's mom was silent for a moment, then asked, "Son, maybe you'll go back to your homeland now. I missed you very much. Now, no one will dare to blame and reproach you." The former cab driver also had thoughts of returning to his hometown, like angry autumn flies. But he didn't want to let down Thomas, who had entrusted him with a position in his firm. John tried not to give his boss any reason to be unhappy with him, and was frankly afraid of his reaction to the news of his decision to move. Occasionally meeting Emily, Thomas's daughter, John rejoiced at the transformation of the girl who had returned to the people who loved her. One day Emily said hello. "Excuse me, I need your help again, or rather my biological mom. I think about her every day. Let her be who she is. But I'm embarrassed that I'm doing so well, as they say, all chocolate, and she's probably barely making ends meet just to buy booze. I don't want to go back to her. I've tried it before. It just hurt everyone. I'm afraid to contact my foster parents to avoid hurting them, so I decided to contact you. Do you think it is possible to put my biological mother in some rehabilitation center? I'm working right now, and I'm willing to pay for services to bring her back to a normal human state." John had an epiphany. "I know someone who can answer that question quickly. I think Deborah would be happy to hear from you and help in any way she can. And if you want my opinion, you don't have to hide your intentions from Amber and Thomas. I think they'll appreciate your generosity. You're acting like a real man, which is something to be proud of." The girl thanked the former cab driver who had changed her fate so dramatically and contacted Deborah. Soon the changes affected Emily's biological mother, because Deborah, who was used to doing everything well, took over. There was every chance that the woman would successfully rid herself of her bad habits. Emily shared updates with John about how her birth mom was doing. And despite all attempts not to fall in love, the man fell under the charm of a cute girl. They had already switched to you and occasionally went to the diner, laughing at the conventions. John was uncomfortable that he was attracted to the daughter of the boss who had done so much for him. Deciding that he should move out of harm's way, John headed over to Thomas. Of course, the subordinate did not confess to the boss that the main motive for leaving the career that had just begun to develop was a crush on Emily, and told only about the fact that mom needs care. Thomas did not become indignant, and even promised to give John the best characterization if necessary. Before leaving, no matter how hard John tried to avoid it, he still met with Emily. She caught up with him at the end of the hallway and held him by the sleeve of his jacket, forcing him to turn to her and linger longer than was necessary for a simple greeting. "John, is it just me, or are you hiding from me?" The man had no choice but to lie. "Hello, Emily. Is it your imagination? It's just that I'm getting ready to move and have to do everything almost on the run. So I apologize if somewhere maybe I ran by without stopping." Emily's sly squint made it clear that the girl didn't believe him one bit, which was why she asked another provocative question. "Why, and now, when I caught you by the sleeve? You didn't turn around on purpose when you noticed me." John tried to turn the conversation to a neutral topic. "Emily, how is your birth mom doing? What does Deborah say? Can she be picked up from the rehab center soon?" The emotion on Emily's face disappeared. She admitted that freeing a relative from her vices is not easy, and added, "You're probably avoiding me also because you fear bad heredity." John was so indignant that he involuntarily burst out. "How stupid you are. You've had an angelic appearance and a brilliant upbringing. You're beautiful and smart. Why are you so insecure?" Emily blushed. She had certainly caught John's sympathy, but he had never paid her even disguised compliments before, hardly resembling simple friendship. The girl was scared to trust a man again, but she felt drawn to John, so she held his sleeve and offered, "My mom, Amber, has an anniversary this coming weekend. If you're interested in how my wandering story ends, be sure to come by." Emily quickly, before John realized it, begged him to come, promising him she would. "The birthday girl would be very happy to have you come. Mom considers you a family friend after you brought me home. I'll tell you, there's a huge surprise in store for everyone there." Later, John received a formal invitation from Thomas and headed to the celebration at the appointed time, not even realizing how memorable it would turn out to be. Before the party began, with only Amber, Thomas, Emily, and himself in the banquet room, the doors swung open. A slender, tanned woman with a stunning gait strode toward the birthday girl standing at the empty counter of a hired footman. Emily, seeing the guest, purposely went behind John's broad back and pulled out her cell phone. The woman, walking up to Amber, began her congratulatory speech. "Amber, heartfelt congratulations to you." Suddenly there was the trill of a cell phone. The woman glanced at the screen, dropped the call, and continued her speech with a smile, but she was interrupted again by the ringing. Amber prompted, "Amelia, I'm glad you took the time. To finish talking, take the call." The friend who had arrived from abroad waved her hands and had already switched off her smartphone when Emily called out to her. "Why do not answer me and Amelia just news? I want to know if I can go home or am I still cursed on winter evenings?" Even the tan didn't hide the blush on her guest's cheeks, but she tried to feign joy. "Emily, and you're here. How glad I am that Amber and Thomas have found the strength to forgive you and you're back together. That's a big deal. Let's celebrate." Amelia slapped herself on the forehead and laughed. "I forgot my present in the car. Wait a second, 1 foot here, 1 foot there. I'll get it." Amelia couldn't get past Thomas and John at the door, however. Giggling, she hurried to the emergency exit. But her escape-like maneuver was interrupted by the birthday girl. "Amelia, please explain why you hate me so much that you decided to separate me even from my daughter. I have only once failed to yield to you, and you've invented a trial you wouldn't wish on an enemy. Just answer me why." Panic flashed across the guest's face, but she admitted it was out of jealousy. "You've always been the best, and I'm always in the background. You think it's easy to fall short? I've been looking for your weakness for a long time. Your husband turned out to be your husband, so I went after your daughter with the help of Michael the catcher. Then it was a matter of technique. You can't prove my guilt, and you can kiss your money goodbye." But Amelia was wrong. Thanks to Thomas's connections, Michael was extradited, and together with Amelia he was put under investigation. A little later, they were sentenced. Emily and John's relationship grew more tender by the day. Of course, it didn't go unnoticed for long, as both Amber and Thomas were now closely watching every change in their child's mood. The girl believed in love again, and it was impossible not to notice it. John already had his labor book in hand when his boss invited him into the office where his wife and daughter were already there. Smiling, Thomas said, "Now that's a role I never thought I'd ever find myself in, but John seems to be too decent. My wife and I have long noticed that you have a soft spot for Emily and are trying to keep your feelings in check. Well, we don't mind you two dating. We even agree that the two of you should go to your homeland to think about and decide where you'd like to live. Amber and I agree to whatever you decide in advance." John and Emily couldn't believe their happiness. After a visit to the man's mom in her hometown, they decided to take her in and settle closer to the girl's adoptive parents. This decision satisfied everyone without exception,